This is the July 20th meeting of the State Board of Equalization. Today, we've got to my right, Glenn Trobit, Bridge, to my left, Bob Schiffmacher, and to his left, Tyree Gray. We are the State Board of Equalization. Providing counsel to us today is Michelle Briggs, Deputy Attorney General. Jeff Mitchell, Deputy Director, Department of Taxation, is here as Secretary to our board. Please introduce your staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Mitchell, for the record. As mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of Local Government Services for the Department of Taxation. And helping provide staff is Christina Griffith and Denisa Johnston. And thanks.
Thank you. First, we're going to go over some rules for the hearing today. Mic etiquette. So, rules here, bear with me, please. Silence all devices. To speak in Carson City or Las Vegas, press the mic button at your seat. The button will light up. You're ready to talk. When speaking, adjust the mic so it's pointed directly at your mouth. Position yourself about 6 inches from the mic. If you have a soft voice, get closer. If your voice is loud, get further away. Press the mic button again to mute the mic when you're done speaking. To request to speak on the Zoom call, press the raised hand icon on your device or *9 on your phone. Use only one mic at a time. All participants, please mute your devices when you're not speaking. Now that you're educated on how to use the mic, we're going to go over some rules for this hearing, and they are: do not talk when members of the State Board of Equalization are talking. Do not speak unless you have permission from the chairman. When the chairman gives you permission to speak, speak to the members of the State Board, not to anyone else. Do not raise your voice or act in a hostile or aggressive manner. Do not speak down to, demean, or harass anyone in the proceedings or anyone in the meeting. If you want to move from behind the table, ask the chairman for permission to do so. Handouts such as evidence must be handed to the State Board coordinator for delivery to the State Board members. Do not interrupt anyone. Do not argue with the chairman, State Board members, or the parties to the hearing. Do not speak, make noise, or gesture with your body when someone else is speaking. So with that being said, today our order is when cases are called, Jeff will call the cases, then the assessor will provide a brief orientation of the property, then the petitioner will have 15 minutes to present their case, followed by 15 minutes from the respondent, which will be the assessor's office, to present their case, then a final 5 minutes by the petitioner for rebuttal closing, followed by the State Board deliberating and rendering a decision. And throughout that back and forth, the State Board members may well ask some questions. We'll allow for additional time for our questions. With that, the next thing is public comment. Let's open up. Is anyone here? Please come forward if you would like to give public comment. And Christina, will you see if there's anyone on the Zoom call that would like to provide public comment at this time?
If there's anybody on the Zoom, if you could please hit the raise hand button at the bottom if you would like to give public comment. It doesn't look like we have any, Chairman.
Okay, and we will have that at the end of our hearing as well. Michelle, will you please swear in anyone that plans to testify today?
Sure. Michelle Briggs for the record. If anyone would like to testify today, if you could stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Jeff, please call our first case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under agenda item F, we have for possible action role change request pursuant to NRS 361.769 subsection 3B for the tax years 2021, 1920, and 1819 on the secured roll. This is case number 21-174. The petitioner is the Clark County Assessor, and the respondent is the County of Clark Aviation Beltway Business Park Warehouse number 7 lease. It is commercial property / possessory interest. For your information, the notice of hearing can be found on page 14. There was a stipulation that was agreed to on this case, and that was sent to the State Board members in a separate file. All of the tax years have been stipulated to that were set to be heard today, and the Clark County Assessor is here to orientate the property for you.
Let's start with a brief orientation of the property.
Tom Verheyen for the Clark County Assessor's Office. The subject property is located on the east side of Decatur Boulevard at the Clark County 215 Highway off-ramp. It has direct frontage to both Decatur Boulevard and Highway 215. It consists of a 226,274 square foot industrial building. It was constructed in 2019 and is situated on a 13.26 acre parcel. As was mentioned, the assessor's office and the taxpayer have reached an agreement on value for all years in question.
Thank you for that. I want to make sure from your and petitioner that what we have, the stipulation from 21-174 does in fact reflect what you guys have agreed to. Oh, different party. You guys are for the next, okay. And that was, so what's in the record on the 2 pages, I believe it's page 4 and 5 of 21-174, does reflect your guys' understanding of the stipulation.
We don't have a copy of the electronic version that you have with the SB pages, but we do have, we can read those stipulations into the record if you prefer.
It's a letter dated July 14th, 2021.
Yeah, that is correct. It's page 3, 4, and 5, I believe.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Well, with that, I am ready to accept a motion from the state board relative to the stipulation.
Would you mind stating your last name, Tom? This,
Yes, it's Tom Verheyen, Verheyen.
thank you.
Great. And we've got a motion.
Mr. Chair, so motion that we accept the stipulation as presented by the county in regards to file number 21-174.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further comment from the board? Seeing as none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Jeff, please call the next case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Agenda Item G, for possible action, appeals from the action of a County Board of Equalization pursuant to NRS 361.400 for the 2021-2022 secured roll and the 2020-2021 unsecured roll. First, we would like to call case number 21-143. BPC Henderson LLC is the petitioner. It is commercial property and the respondent is the Clark County Assessor. The proper notice of hearing can be found on page 835 of your documentation. For the petitioner, we have Shelley Becker, Sean Venstrom here in person, as well as Charles Jack, which is available by Zoom. And the Clark County Assessor is the respondent, and they are here in person as well.
Great, thank you. With that, once you're ready, Clark County, please state your name for the record first and then provide a brief orientation of the property.
Good morning. Carol Doherty for Clark County. The subject property is the Galleria Mall, located at the northwest corner of Sunset Road and Stephanie Street in Henderson. The property is comprised of mall inline shop space, the food court area, restaurant space, one anchor store, some storage space, and common areas. Restaurant space was added in the year 2015 as part of the property's updating and expansion and consists of table dining. Gross leasable area is estimated to be 446,860 square feet. Occupancy at year-end 2020 was reported at 83%. The property is situated on 45.38 acres. Our value estimate for the property is $90,940. I'm sorry, $90,947,978.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Petitioners, please state your name for the record, and then you have 15 minutes to present your case.
Shelley Becker, authorized agent for BPC Henderson LLC.
Sean Benstrom, authorized agent.
Hi, good morning. As the county has stated, we're here appealing the gallery at Sunset Mall, which is located in Henderson, Nevada. We went through the Board of Equalization through the Clark County, and we are appealing the decision from the board. And I would like to ask board members here if we can submit a small summary and some year-to-date information as to the operations of the mall.
Has Clark County seen that information yet?
They have not.
Will you share with them and see if they have any objections to you sharing that information with us? And take the time you need, Clark County, to review.
It's not that we would be opposed to it necessarily, but they're getting information for things that have happened since the January 1st date, which would be our date of appraisal for this particular hearing. And they're providing information as up to June of this year, which no other taxpayer would be allowed to provide that kind of information. So on that basis, I would say that the county would have to object.
Board, what's your thoughts? Generally, anything that happened or wasn't reasonably foreseeable as of January 1st, 2021, we shouldn't consider, but what's the appetite of the board?
We have, in the hearing yesterday, denied, we chose not to look at anything that occurred after January, after the date of value, and I think that that should be continued here. If there's a separate page that has a summary of information that's in the package, that would be acceptable, but additional information that would not have been available on the date of values, we typically do not accept it.
And feel free to offer a response.
Yes, I understand completely. The reason for that was that the decision of the Board of Equalization of Clark County was to state that that it was a temporary reduction because of COVID and that the mall would start to bound back a little bit. And so we were going to provide an example of what was happening year to date from that period in time from 2019, 2021 as an example that it's not bounding back. But I completely understand.
So a confirmation of a trend that already existed.
Of the trend that we
you
were
believed already
arguing and that
existed,
the board did not agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to allow it in and give the weight that we feel it's due, give them that latitude, but that's I'm up for what the board, and I'll agree with what the board wants to do here. Any guidance, Tyree, thoughts? We let the new member make these tough decisions.
That's it. I mean, the guy, let the lawyer do it, right? But we're represented by learned counsel here, so I don't have to be that guy today. No, and so I would actually tend to agree with you, Mr. Chair, that it is a summary page, and so if it's representing a trend that is already consistent within the 836 pages in this document, then it might be useful to be able to take a look at it.
Great. We only got a 100-page file, so I think we want the Cliff Note version.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. We've got we all got to have a full copy. With that, before we make the decision, Glenn, are you okay? Michelle, do we need a motion of the board to allow it in?
Yeah, and I'd also like you to address your regulation on new evidence
Great.
in NAC 361.739. So this is new evidence. It was not provided to the county board. So in a hearing of an appeal of a decision of the county board, a party that wishes to introduce evidence that was not submitted to the county board in the first instance must satisfy the state board that the new evidence could not, by due diligence, have been discovered or secured before the final adjournment of the county board, and submit evidence in writing to the state board and all parties of record not less than 7 business days before the hearing on the matter.
Great. With that, is our board ready to vote?
Yeah, just for the record, I would distinguish just that. I mean, we're using this not necessarily as evidence, but more as exemplary to support what is already in the trended documents. And so to that extent, I do feel comfortable taking a review. If this was something separate and distinct that was, I mean, again, by representations of the petitioner, what we're hearing is that this is really just to show a continuation of a trend so that moving forward, we can have an appreciation of what this property looks like.
Great. Is that a motion?
I would like to motion that we be able to take under consideration the document that's being presented by petitioner.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further comment? Seeing as none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 3-1, so you do have the ability to share it with the board. Feel free to proceed with your case.
Okay. Shelley Becker for the record. So again, thank you for admitting the additional information. I will refer to it as we go through, and essentially what property tax resources our firm does. We represent property owners all throughout the country regarding specializing in regional shopping malls. This is a Class B shopping mall that is going through the same as many throughout the country. So obviously we all know about COVID-19, and I will address that at some point, but I want to just emphasize that what we've been seeing is a historical trend leading up to March 2020. I'm sure you guys have all heard of the Amazon effect, where there's been a sharp decline in brick and mortar retail centers, specifically at regional shopping malls, which has been causing not only a decline in rental rates, but also an increase in capitalization rates. And with the decline, with the tenancy rental rates, the operators are unable to sustain the cost that it takes to maintain a brick and mortar, but specifically a regional shopping mall. And then when you come into March of 2020 with COVID-19, it basically slammed an already declining retail industry, specifically with the regional shopping malls. The subject property was closed for 2 months, nearly 2 months in 2020. And as it reopened, not only was it subject to local ordinances regarding occupancy, but also limiting operating hours. The GM had indicated that there was issues with tenants maintaining payroll and overhead, having to ask. They were part of the reason why the operating hours were reduced as well, to maintain that payroll expense. And to illustrate the specific, in summary, the total NOI declined from 2019 to 2020 by almost 17%. And if you look at it from 2017 to 2020, we're almost at 30% decline in NOI. So this particular center has had a history of suffering and decline, and what happened with COVID-19, it just pushed it over the edge. In addition to not just being closed during the pandemic, but the other additional impact that it has to commercial real estate, specifically in retail, is the social distancing, supply chain disruptions, employment loss, consumer confidence. They're still, as things were starting up in 2021, in 2020, people were not interested in being out in public and being around a lot of people. So essentially what happened is that one of the largest retail, some of the largest retail brands that were already facing a situation that was looking dire are after COVID-19 are now on this long, arduous road to recovery over the next few years. So they're seeing this increase in e-commerce. We all know the Amazon effect that has caused people now, and after quarantine, everyone is now very comfortable shopping online. It's now become a very normal thing, where before it was just a convenience or a luxury. And so we're seeing this increase in e-commerce increase and the decrease in foot traffic continue to decrease in the regional shopping mall. And I understand we have limited amount of time, so I know this is a large document, most of which is the appraisal that we had performed. So I will kind of go through in general to emphasize the point about the retail industry declining. The number of bankruptcies that have occurred, as you'll see on the graph on it's my page 3, I'm not certain what it is on the evidence, but in terms of the increase of retail and retail tenants that are filing for bankruptcy, such as J. Crew, JCPenney's, it's something that's been occurring for the past several years. I have another example from CoStar emphasizing some of these, and then on my page 5, we have a timeline starting from 2016 to every year going forward of number of retail tenants that are going bankrupt. Most of them are in regional shopping malls, many of which are in the subject property, Payless, The Children's Place, Forever 21, New York and Company, JCPenney's, a number of tenants that are at risk of bankruptcy going forward based on their national presence. Since 2017, nearly 14,000 retail stores have closed. The majority of the tenants closing are mall-oriented. So again, on a list we have here for number of closures, we have about 8 here at the property, one of which had already left by the lien date of January 1st, 1/21. Now, we can sit here and talk about COVID-19 and how much it's impacted, but how do we tangibly define what that is in terms of a decline in value? So we do have an example of a portfolio purchase between Taubman Mall, by Simon Properties of Taubman Mall portfolio that was in basically they were February of 2020, right before the pandemic. They were about to close on this portfolio. It was an 80% stake in the portfolio for $3.6 billion, and that's $52.50 a share. So as it was just before closing, the pandemic hits, litigation ensues, and they ultimately settle on a transaction price down to $43 a share. That's about an 18.1% discount from a pre-pandemic to a post-pandemic mall acquisition. I do want to emphasize that this is that the sales per square foot at most of these centers averaged about $972 a square foot. These are Class A high-end portfolio. But we believe this is a strong indicator of a market decline and believe that it's reasonable to conclude that there's a higher risk of the lower grade properties that we're looking at here with the Class B. So this would be a minimum of a discount amount of what market value would be before and after COVID. One of the indicators, as well as the sales per square foot occurring at the property prior to we look at it, and we're looking at sales per square foot, or the inline tenants under 10,000 square feet. Prior to COVID-19 occurring, the sales were just over $400 a square foot. Post COVID-19, they were just over $300 a square foot. It was a significant decline, although we're considering, as of this lien date, the mall is a Class B. According to some market data, specifically Corp has Realty Advisors, it could be considered a C mall. But in terms of how it was handled in the appraisal and in terms of the valuation, it's B, although we do foresee some of these classifications changing in the near future since the direction of the malls are rapidly changing. And we also took a look at, as well as the occupancy cost of the tenants in place. Occupancy cost is the total cost of the tenant to do business, rent, utilities, insurance, divided by their total sales. There's a significant amount of tenants that are, if we're using the Class B classification, that occupancy cost should be in that 11 to 13.5% range. Anything over that 13% is considered a high-risk. Tenants likely to not renew or to leave prior to their expiration date. In the case with the property as of the lien date or in the year end 2020, there were 71 tenants with over 11% and 57 tenants with over 13.5%. That is a significant indicator that there are tenants, that the risk of the future cash flows at this property are high. Some of the other classification parameters that we utilized was through Newport, Knight, and Frank. Like I said, between the Class B and B plus, you're looking at about $350 to $599 a square foot. And coming down, it does have the capitalization range from 11% to 16% in this classification parameters. I do have some photos involved in the subject property as well, as we did a site visit with the appraiser. Many of the spaces are dark in the Dix corridor. There's a former Hollister space that has shadowed the area, which has been very difficult to release because no one wants to be in an area that there's no traffic. No customers want to send down that corridor, and other new tenants do not want to be leased there. And if they do, they are not paying much rent at all, especially compared to market. The county did mention the new development that occurred in 2014 and 15, new restaurant space. There is a space, the picture on top of my page 17, that is still, it's over 8,000 square feet. It's a front inline space that has not been developed, or it still has dirt on the ground since 2014. There's no, that's from the lien date, that's almost 6 to 7 years where there's been no tenancy there. And many of the restaurants that have been, that were built out are vacant, still vacant. So as I mentioned before, we have the owner commissioned an independent appraisal from Integra Realty Resources. That's why we have Mr. Charles Jack here with us virtually. And he performed an appraisal that is supporting our opinion of value of $76 million. I will go over briefly what he has in this appraisal, but in terms of any specific valuation questions, I would ask that you can specifically ask him. In terms of looking at the recently signed leases, most of the subject leases that were signed within a year of the lien date were temporary tenants. Many of these, it's pretty common in retail markets right now. Temporary tenants make up the majority of new tenants due to the fact that they have a lot of space that they just need to fill, whether that's a mom and pop shop or a holiday shop or a new business that's starting out that needs a space. More regional shopping malls are looking to fill space because they need to look like it's occupied so that people want to come there and shop. As I mentioned earlier, the historical income and expense has been declining as of the 19 and 20. It's down about 17% or just shy of 17%. As you'll see reflected in a lot of the leases that were signed, many of them that he found were inline, some food court, and some inline specialty tenants that he established as rental, as market rent. And this would be found on page 134 of his appraisal. So what they're finding is that, like as I mentioned, the temporary tenants are common, and then there's some food court common. You're not seeing a lot of large regular tenancy being signed. As of the lien date, the vacancy was 17%. In addition to that, 45,648 square feet, or 10% of the total square footage, was temporary tenants. So how the appraisal handled that is he took the average rental rate of the specialty net tenants, which is about $10.97 a square foot, which is a discount of about just shy of 67% of the overall average market rent that was being signed on a regular tenants basis. And of that 66.8%, of that 10.2%, is 6.8% of considering additional vacancy on top of the 17. So he's concluding at a 23.61% vacancy, because the idea of that is that temporary tenants are not going to be a regular tenant. They're going to continue to maintain this temporary cycle or continue to be vacant as well. Utilizing historical operating expenses, ratio of about 35.1%. And then as we'll go over the NOI in place, the cap rate that he utilized was a modified cap rate loading method. Essentially, the center is not recovering all of their expenses. So it took a review of historically the percentage of which the center is recovering of the real estate taxes. On average, it was about 41% that was not being recovered. In that calculation, he's taking that, concluding at 40% of the tax rate in place at the time, and rounding it, adding that 41% to the capitalization rate. The concluded capitalization rate. And going forward, again, he utilized Newport, Knight, Frank, some sales to support, while regional shopping malls are very complex in terms of the anchors that are involved in that sale, whether or not, what's happening in that specific market. He was able to find some that were similar. That one was in Morrow, Georgia, which is about 13.27% cap rate. In addition, there was the Green Street Advisors, which is the research firm that gathers data and information for REITs and regional shopping malls throughout the country. Their specific indicated cap rate for the property was 12.9%, subject to the 2020 NOI that they had in their that they had as part of their research. And as such, he's concluded a 12.29% capitalization rate, and then added the 0.41% modification rate for a concluded rate at 13.31%. In the NOI that he reviewed historically, he essentially established an as-is and an in-place NOI using the assumptions we've already discussed, and net operating income of 194,957. The sales comparison approach was not used, although it was used for the capitalization rates of sales in the market because of the nuances of regional shopping malls and the amount of adjustments that will be needed. It was not included in this analysis. Therefore, he's concluding at that 76 million amount. And I wanted to kind of, I know I'm running out of time, or maybe I'm already out of time, but wanted to go over what occurred at the Clark County Board of Equalization in terms of the concluded determination of the board using the actual 2019 NOI and using a 13% cap rate. And their reasoning for that is to say, as I mentioned earlier, that this is a temporary decline and that the property will stabilize and come back to 2019. And that's more of an indicator of what's going to happen in the future. So we were able to obtain, which is new information in terms of what's happening at the center now as an indicator to compare to what's been happening in the past. So in the exhibit that I provided, you will see that January through June compared for 19, 20, and 21, the revenue has declined over the years historically. And from overall 19 to 20, if you're comparing the actual 2019 revenue and trends happening to 2021, revenue is down 16%. You'll also notice that the NOI is down 4%. The main reason for that is the expenses have been drastically cut. So if you compare 2019 to 2021 expenses from January to June, it's a 40% decline. If it's from 2020 to 21, it's a 26% decline. And in that time frame in 2020, the property had been closed for a few months. So if you can understand the amount of expenses this property is trying to slice in order to just keep the property operating, it's just an indication of the direction, not only that it was heading, but that in terms of what COVID-19 has continued to do to it as it's trying to stay afloat.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this point? We probably will have questions after the 5-minute rebuttal, but at this point, let's go to the assessor's office, and when you're ready, please proceed with your case. And I think we gave a little bit more than 15 minutes to petitioners, so please feel free to take a similar amount of time if you so desire.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk about facts specific to the subject and its market area. The Galleria Mall is located in a major retail area at the corner of Sunset and Stephanie, blocks from the US 93-95 Interstate 515 corridor. Many national retailers are located within a half a mile of the mall, and they all chose this location, proving that the location is viable and desirable. Some of the major national retailers that are here within this half mile are Target, Hobby Lobby, Ross, Best Buy, Petco, Nordstrom Rack, TJ Maxx, Costco, Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, Burlington, and many others. The mall is also directly across from Sunset Station Hotel and Casino, which also chose this location. Demographics in this area are also strong. The average household income reported by Colliers International for the year-end 2020 for Henderson is $99,000. That's the highest of all 8 metro areas, metro submarkets in Las Vegas Metro. The mall has 5 anchor stores, and they're all open and all operating. Macy's, Dillard's, JCPenney's, Kohl's, and Dick's Sporting Goods. The mall has a strong historical NOI and occupancy over the past few years. Looking at the subject appraisal that was provided by the petitioner, looking at SBE 570 for the year 2019, NOI was $11,823,237. SBE 576 documents NOI for 2018 at $11,941,120. And SBE 583 for the year 2017 documents NOI at $14,019,519. Similarly, the mall has had an occupancy between 92 and 96% over the past several years, also documented in the primarily in the appraisal addenda. Looking at SBE 610, as of February 2020, the occupancy was 92%. SBE 678, page 678, date not provided on the document, occupancy was 94%. On SBE 516, for year-end 2018, occupancy 96%. And is documented in an article with an interview from the property manager at year-end 2017, occupancy was 93%. The mall's 2020 year-end occupancy of 83.24% is close to the International Council of Shopping Centers average of 87% for malls nationwide. We appreciate that malls are challenged at this time and have gone through a lot of turmoil due to the COVID shutdown, but the subject Galleria Mall is really operating pretty close to average for malls. The mall, as I mentioned, has received a couple of significant renovations and additions in the past few years. About $8 million was spent in 2013 and 14, and an additional investment of about $25 million was spent in 2015. In estimating our potential gross income on SBE 771, we first examined the anchor space, which is Dick's Sporting Goods. This space is 81,312 square feet, and we're estimating the contract rent of about 83 cents per square foot on a monthly basis. The inline shop space, we're estimating $2 a square foot on a monthly basis. Inline specialty space, we're estimating at $1.50 per square foot. Food court space at $5.83 per square foot. Restaurant space at $2.95 per square foot. And storage space, we're estimating at 50 cents a square foot, generating a potential gross income of $10,710,555. For vacancy, we're estimating 10%. That is based on data provided by Colliers for the year end and applied analysis. We're adding other income of $360,000, which is primarily kiosk rental. Expenses we're estimating at 15%, which is above the average documented by International Council of Shopping Center data. Developing a net operating income of $8,499,525. The capitalization rate applied is 9%. This is supported by PricewaterhouseCoopers. In the case, page SBE 823, it's documenting an average of regional malls at 6.93%. B malls, it also estimates at 9.3%. We're estimating a stabilized income of $94,439,709. From that, we apply an adjustment for lease-up, and that is documented on SBE 772. Appreciating that the subject is about 17% vacant, and we're estimating stabilized vacancy at 90%, we're going to lease up 7% of the space over a span of 5 years. We're estimating a market rate of $2 per square foot. We're estimating an allowance, a tenant improvement allowance of $15 per square foot, and discounting the 5-year cash flow at a safe rate of 6% to come up with an adjustment of $2,019,699, which we subtract from our value estimate. For, as we concluded originally, a property value of $92,420,020, and we agree with the county's analysis for the case as presented in February, and we're estimating a concluded value for the property, $90,947,978, which equates to about $190 per square foot. That is supported by our local comparable sales, documented SBE 790. The 190 per square foot puts the subject on par with neighborhood centers, which have a mean average of $191 a square foot and a median of $170. These are all Las Vegas sales which occurred in the year 2020. We consider our values supported. I'd also like to point out the rents that the subject has achieved, currently achieving. I'd like to present the board with a blow-up of SBE page 513, which is in the appraisal, but it's way too small to read. So we've blown it up and made it a little more legible for purposes of discussion.
Does the petitioner have any objections to that?
No objection.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Is that just a blow up of what's already in the record? We have it and are ready to proceed.
Okay, thank you. All right, looking at this, this is a current rent roll as presented in the appraisal. And looking between the lines that are at the top and almost at the bottom of the page, isolates the 98 primary retail tenants that are at the property as reported by the appraisal. It includes the anchor store, the Dick's Sporting Goods anchor store, which is 81,000 square feet, so that I'm excluding that from this discussion. Looking at the far right column, it shows rent achieved, contract rent achieved from all these tenants, as reported by the appraisal. Of these 97 tenants, 72 have a higher contract rate than the $24 as estimated by the petitioner's appraisal. And in most cases, substantially higher than $24. Just looking at, well, especially the jewelry stores. Look, these stores, for example, Danielle's Jewelers is paying $101 per square foot. Fast Fix Jewelry is paying $85 a square foot. K Jewelry is paying $164 a square foot. And Zales is paying $234 a square foot. So by understating so dramatically the income potential of this property, the petitioner's indicated value is far below what market value might be. Out of these 97 tenants that are examined as far as what contract rent they're paying, each contract rent that's above $24 is highlighted in yellow in the right-hand column. And that 74% of all of these tenants are paying beyond the estimated market rental rate of $24 at this property. And I think it documents how valuable the Galleria Mall space is. These are high rents paid, higher than our market averages for the rest of the metro area. And at the very least, they're contracted for a number of years, and I have no evidence that they vacated the space. So this is going to be income accruing to the subject. Okay, a new tenant is currently moving into one of the former restaurant spaces at the front of the mall. It's
And
motorcycle.
was this known or reasonably foreseeable as of January 1st?
I do not know if they were under contract at that time.
Okay. I want to be careful. We give some latitude, but I really want to be careful with stuff that wasn't reasonably known as of January 1st, 2021.
Chairman Johnson, Mary Ann Widener with the Clark County Assessor's Office. The appellant has put forth some projections of what's happening over the last 6 months. And so all we're really trying to establish is that there are also good things that are happening as well. So the whole property is not vacating. They are actually leasing. They're doing construction. They're bringing in new tenants. So the picture that's been painted is if there's no one ever going to move into this property and it's going to continue to decline and decline till there's nothing left. I'm not saying that that might not happen someday, but we are not at that place right now. And there is further things that are happening, and we're just trying to give the indication of what's happening in the current market.
Okay, I'm good with it. I just want to be careful, and the purpose for us would be to just establish trends that existed. And I think the space probably was listed for lease as of January 1st. Maybe they're talking to tenants, but this board's probably not going to rely on a lot from either side that happened after January 1st.
We understand. We just really want to explain the trend, and that, you know, the indication from the appellant is that the trend has continued to decline, but it's not all bad. There are good things that are happening as well. So
Okay, I think for that limited purpose, we're okay with listening to it.
A tenant by the name of Cycle Gear is moving into the front space, the most predominant space in the mall, I think, at the south side, formerly occupied by Bravo's Restaurant. Cycle Gear, this is their second location in the metro area. When I was at the property a few weeks ago, I saw their extensive tenant improvements under construction, and their signs in place stating opening coming soon, further documenting that the mall is viable and a desirable location. Our selected cap rate of 9%, I think, is conservative and very realistic given market information. Capping a property at 13% into perpetuity is, well, pessimistic to say the least. As I mentioned, the retail area is viable. Major tenants that are there, that chose to be there, are up and operating, and capitalizing the subject property at 76% occupancy into perpetuity, again, I think understates the potential for this mall. Some malls throughout the country have failed and have lost anchors. That's not our subject. Our subject is in a strong demographic area. As I mentioned, the highest household income at the year-end 2020 out of all of our submarkets. And the fact that it is leasing up space, I think, indicates there is a good future for this mall. It's also encouraging some facilities, an outdoor mall area that they built a few years ago that allows the property to do some attraction events to generate business for the property. I think the sale comps indicated in the petitioner's report are all, 2 of them are in very small market areas, and all of them have lost anchors. Not so with the subject property. As I mentioned, all the anchors, the 5 anchors, are up and operating.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
Yes, so Mary Ann Widener with the Clark County Assessor's Office. I think to just kind of summarize where we're at on this property, that maybe we've talked about a lot of things. I don't think the petitioners and I are that far, and the Clark County offices are that far apart with regards to what the NOI is. They've even on their paper that they've turned into you indicated that they're in agreement with our concluded NOI. The appraisal is very close to where we're at. I think the crux of the whole argument comes down to the cap rate. The first thing I want to note in the cap rate is that they've loaded the cap rate, similar to a case you had heard just yesterday. We are not using a loaded cap rate. We are expensing the real estate taxes within our expense ratio. And if we would just look at that on its face value, 2020, in spite of how horrible it was, the property only declined by 17%. You have seen in the properties that we presented even as of yesterday that we saw much greater decline than that. So we are recognizing, yes, that retail, it has been impacted by the market. The Amazon parallel that was brought forth is very real. We are very aware of it. Because of it, our office has actually made adjustments on practically every big box retail that we have on record, including this one. We had actually made adjustments to this one. So we are recognizing that. I just want to make sure we're distinguishing the difference between the two and we're not putting them together. But in spite of COVID and everything else, if you even look at their 2020 numbers, the decline was still only 17% in reality. So this is not a failing mall. It is still viable. They are still in business. They're continuing to lease property. And so what we have to determine is if the cap rate that we've applied to that final NOI number is realistic. The county board felt that it actually was a little bit too high, but in the end, instead of applying a higher cap rate to our lower NOI that we had done on our analysis, they chose to apply the higher cap rate to the stabilized numbers, which are very indication of the past 2018 and 2019 year. You can see that those numbers were very stable for those 2 years prior to COVID. And so I'm not saying that there wasn't any other impact from retail, but we also know there has been a lot of pent-up frustration and people have been out, they're spending, they're shopping, and they want to get out. So what that trend will be over time next year may be a whole different story, we don't know. So just in summarizing, I think the difference in our evaluation really comes down to the cap rate and whether the board agrees that we should be applying something like a 9% or whether we should be applying something as high as a 13%. In the end, we're not here to argue the conclusions that the county board made. We're saying it's very close to our final number. We were at 92 million. They came to 90 million. We just feel that 76 million is too aggressive, and we think it's too low for this property. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and let's talk about cap rates and just give us some more context to why you decided on a 9 cap rate and what you relied upon. I know you touched on it some during your presentation, but I do agree that this is about cap rate and what's important. I think that's what this case is going to turn on, so I would welcome further insight as to what you guys relied upon, how you determined an appropriate capitalization rate.
We relied substantially on information provided by PricewaterhouseCoopers, illustrated on SP's page 823, which documents national regional mall market cap rates. The range indicated is 4.5 to 15% with an average of 6.93. It also puts in some information about mall cap rates. B malls rated at 9.33, A malls at 6.28%. We place substantial reliance on that, as well as local sales of properties. SBE 790, mean cap rate for more investment type sales was 6.1, median 6.08. For the neighborhood centers, which is supporting our value per square foot substantially, the cap rate indicated was 6.73, mean and median of 7.10. These are all local market sales occurring in the year 2020. Although true, they're not regional malls, but they reflect market conditions, what was going on here in Las Vegas during 2020. So our utilized cap rate of 9% is on the high end, and we think realistic to represent what's going on with the Galleria Mall. And we do appreciate there is uncertainty in the market, although, as Marianne did say, we've all been experiencing and witnessing a lot of recovery and maybe even participating in that ourselves, going out shopping and not wearing masks. Does that help explain how we derived our rate?
It does, and from your broad experience, not just you guys present retail shopping center sales on here, but are you aware of anything in Clark County selling for greater than a 10 cap rate based on existing in-place income over the last year or 2 years? What I'm seeing on your chart, and I think there's reasons why it should be higher. This is SB 790 and 791. I think this is a unique animal, but outside the box, riskier assets. Are you guys aware of anything? Is there any basis to go that high to a 13% cap rate based on local data? And that's a broad question. We're just asking and kind of grasping at straws.
I have not seen anything in that area, not even for distressed sales, which is very hard to derive a cap rate from. Nothing. 7.4 is about the highest that we have documented.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would say that we haven't had, even on, I would say on some hotel motels and hotel casinos, we're seeing things, but even the latest sales on those type of properties, the cap rates are considerably lower than what they have been. Of course, apartment sales, it's a different market. Office, I would say, would probably be the one that would be struggling the most. We would probably use a higher cap rate on there, but I don't think we've gone as high as 10 unless it was a really distressed property and very old, needing major renovations, something like that. And we analyzed almost all the offices this year. Industrial, the rates are very low. So I would say across the board, we haven't seen things, above the 10% or higher, with the exception of properties like hotel casinos. But we do analyze those on a going concern value versus this property. So that helps.
That's helpful to me. Board members, any other questions from Clark County? This will be our last opportunity to ask Clark. Any questions? Okay. Well, with that, you've got 5 minutes. We've been giving latitude here, and I think we will have some questions for Charles Jack, but please present your closing arguments, and then we'll ask some questions.
Sean Venstrom, I flew out here, so I feel I need to speak. I'm just a fan of the city. We appreciate the county, and we're very fortunate. We're a boutique firm. I've been doing this a long time. Our firm represents about 25% of the shopping malls, almost 250 shopping malls throughout the U.S. It's a national market. It's not a local market. I fly across the U.S. Generally, we hope to meet with the assessors at the mall and come to some type of agreement, and oftentimes it is cap rate. And the offer still stands for next year. We'd love to work proactively on this. But it's been a cordial experience. And what we try to do, and I think Charles Jack did the same in his appraisal, and this is a unique situation. Usually we're doing our own valuations. We don't have to commission an appraisal, but with Charles, we got an appraisal, and here we are. And certainly it's capitalization rate. I really hope for the sake of our clients that this does come back. I really do. Thankfully, they're well capitalized, right? It's Brookfield. Brookfield is now the manager and not managing owner, but manager and owner of the asset. Unfortunately, QIC, you guys probably read the story, Australian pension fund came into the U.S. starting in 2013, buying 49% of assets of regional malls. They got up to about 11 of them, and there's more recent articles that it's probably in one of these SB pages that indicate, sure, back in 2015, 2016, 2017, ton of capital flowing into this, the risk spreads they felt were there. By January 1st, 2021, we're in the midst of a global pandemic in a regional shopping mall. To counter some of their points, yeah, it's a major retail corridor, absolutely agree. Unfortunately, all those tenants are there, right? What happens when JCPenney goes? I mean, Brookfield was a participant in buying JCPenney, right? So they don't go, they did go BK, but they don't leave every one of their specific properties. It's an interesting game right now, right? So there's so much retail there, and I agree. It's a great retail corridor. We're talking regional shopping mall. This is a national market. This is not a local market. The players in this space, they've always been, right? Forest City developed it. QIC came in as a JV, and now Brookfield, the second largest mall owner in the U.S., and own another pretty prominent asset here in Clark County as well that we're clearly not appealing and not having a discussion. It's the bifurcation as well. It's the A+ on the Strip versus the suburban B. And this is where there's significant challenges. If you're a tenant that's actually opening a space in Nevada right now, very few, right? There's some, sure. Who are you going to choose? You're going to choose the A+ player. You're probably not going to the B market with a ton of competition right around you. When JCPenney goes out of there, I think it's a matter of when, right? It's just like Sears. Sears is down, 30 stores now? JCP will no longer be with us in the next decade. So, what we need to do is, as of January 1st, 2021, and these are some of our first COVID cases, which are really interesting environment, right? We're in the midst of a global pandemic. We've seen 2017, they're pointing to 18 and 19 NOI relatively flat. 2017 NOI is at $14 million. Pre-COVID. 2018, 11.9. So a lot of these leases, the leased fee, there's so much risk associated with them, right? The occupancy cost is very high. The sales are doing poorly. When these tenants roll, they're begging them to stay, or they're paying them to stay. That's the other side of the equation. It's a very, very challenging market. Mall is a four-letter word in the investment community right now, and it truly is. And we sit with these clients day in and day out, and we understand the challenges. And they've got great leasing folks. They're well capitalized. They're trying their best. And yet, again, on the recent handout, we just got it last week, the updated NOI, as anticipated as of January 1st by our fee simple appraisal, NOI continuing to decline. Even though everything's opened up, the Strip looks great. People are coming back. I think we're all tired of this, but they're not coming back to regional malls. They weren't pre-COVID. Post-COVID, it's just too easy, right? That apparel, everything, it's just too easy to buy online, and there's just too much GLA. A lot of these are going through a redevelopment. I think eventually, something will happen here. Nothing, currently, but I don't think it's going to stand as a B mall. So a couple more of the points that really maybe we can focus on cap rate, because that's the big. NOI, I think we're about the same, which is, interesting. So the board, last time agreed with the 13% cap, but then looked at 2019 NOI, which is just interesting methodology. We believe in the appraisal has the correct methodology. NOI, if you're underwriting this, you're investing in this, you're making a loan on this as of January 1st, 2021, middle of global pandemic, NOI has been going like this. You don't know what's happening in 2021. That's the value, that's the data value, right? A lot of risk associated with that. I ask, would any one of you anticipate NOI to go up like this? I don't believe so. The fact is, it has not. With respect to cap rates, it's not, 7.4% in the local market. Sure, this isn't a local market. It's a national market. The PwC, the 9.33 on, I think it was page 823, that's a B+. They don't even report on B anymore. Mr. Corpaz does. Green Street Advisors, who they're REIT advisors, I'm sure the appraisers in the room are familiar with them. They've got it pegged at a 13. If you're going to use 2019 NOI, it's pegged at like a 15.3% capitalization rate. And I know it's tough, and I get it. We walk into these meetings all the time, and we're at cap rates in the teens, which is it's still hard even for us, to comprehend. But this is what the limited sales that are happening. This is what they're trading for. Some of them, you're pushing high teens, low 20s in some of the tertiary markets. This is not that, but still, there's so much risk associated with this. Nobody's lending out. You got to come in with cash, right? Any lender, they're not looking at this. You can't get a loan on this. Starwood tried. They went to the Israeli bond market. I'm sure you guys have read about that. The Israelis are now suing Starwood. Starwood bought 30 of these B malls in 2012. They're down to 6. Everything else is in special servicing or been foreclosed upon, or the Israelis are controlling that subsection of the asset class. So it's a very, very challenged environment. And I believe, Mr. Jack's appraisal was very well supported. The capitalization rate is very well supported. And the NOI is really in line, is slightly higher than the assessor's concluded NOI. So yeah, I agree. It is capitalization rate, but I just would like you to think of the tremendous amount of risk associated with that. And that is our lien date. It's January 1st, 2021. We really hope it comes back. It hasn't shown signs since, but we do hope it comes back. And we do ask that you conclude at the appraised value of $76 million. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean,
And
would you,
what?
sorry to interrupt. Sean, would you mind stating and spelling your last name? Thank you.
Venstrom, V as in Victor, ENSTROM.
What would be helpful for this board is indications from the property of that perceived risk. So are you getting non-renewal notices from tenants? Are tenants not paying? What's going on there to indicate risk? I think we had testimony from the assessor's office that the sales on SBE 47 that are being relied upon, and they're higher, they're in the teens for the cap rates, but all of them had anchors that had already gone out. So that's a clear line I can draw a distinction, but what are you seeing at the property if you're aware relative to non-renewals, what the landlord's having to give at renewal in order to get the tenant to stay, and non-payment or anything else that would indicate risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've seen it in NOI, and then we'll see it on the rent rolls. It's probably here in our package. But as Shelley mentioned, it's all going to, most of it's going to specialty leasing. It's the temporary tenants paying percentage rent in lieu, and that's what you're not seeing. These are the older permanent deals. The new deals, or a lot of the renegotiated, abatements and COVID considerations are going to percentage rent in lieu. So whatever your sales are, we're going to take 10 to 12%. So that's kind of the healthy occupancy cost. You can see, and I don't know specifically, maybe.
Can I add something?
Yeah, maybe Charles, you can address the vacancy question within your appraisal. I don't know exactly where it's at, but I think you did a renewals analysis or a vacancy analysis, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll chime in here real quick. Just want to let you guys know I'm under the weather right now, and I haven't had as much chance to really absorb this as I should have, but I've just been tucked in bed trying to recuperate. So you'll have to forgive me there. Probably the biggest thing I remember with the occupancy analysis is there's a good chunk of tenant percentage that's in the temporary or pop-up category. So these are not, your typical mall anchor inline tenants or mall, how should I say, publicly traded, franchised, nationally recognized name tenants. These are some local area operators that have a specialized use, and they're gonna, a lot of that space is in at low rents and or short-term lease obligations. So some of that in there, I believe, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I believe that was about 10% of the space. If Sean or Shelley have a better estimate, you could chime in. But that's an element I noticed that kind of indicated to me it was a weakened tenant base. Some of the people that they're backfilling over there are not nationally recognized, franchised, known tenants that are inline tenants at typical regional malls. Does that answer the question?
It appears SVE 432, Charles, is where the vacancy rate versus effective rental rate would perhaps assist in the question.
Okay. Bear with me a second. I'll try to turn there. 432 SBE.
Yes, you have a vacancy rate versus effective rental rate chart there.
You said 432? Okay, and that's the Moody's Analytics REIS data. Just realize most of that is the larger Las Vegas retail market space. So that's going to encapsulate all of the various retail property types in the Las Vegas market area. That's not focused or detailed towards strictly regional malls. In fact, some of the studies don't even track regional malls because they're such a specialized animal, and the rents and vacancies are much different in those properties, and depend on that particular property's profile at the time. But that's a general overview. That page is a general overview of the overall market based on the Moody's Reis data.
May I add to that
Yes,
as well?
please.
So I did have a conversation with the GM before, just talking about how things were going. Obviously, that's when I had requested this information. The one thing that she's noticed, the new leases regarding cycle gear, which I did not know at the time of our original appeal, but she did indicate all the leases that are going in now were all negotiated prior to March 2020. So they all got pushed a year or more than a year and are just now getting in to get started. And so the opening dates were pushed dramatically from those. They have had no new leases signed since COVID occurred or been negotiated. Any conversations they're having with renewals. So they have, part of a normal regional shopping mall is to upgrade the frontage and the improvements in the property. Tenants are now asking for tenant improvement allowances in order, and they'll extend their lease maybe a few years in order to do that because they don't have the capital. And because the mall doesn't want to lose them, they're paying them to essentially stay there. So that is the biggest difference that we're seeing in terms of the environment. So sure, the tenants are still in place, but essentially they're being paid to stay there.
Is the mall booking those expenses as a capital expense, or do they appear on the income statement?
It's a capital expense,
Okay.
yeah. And it's significant in the valuation industry, and the mall industry is trying to figure out how to do that. Brookfield actually, as an operator, has an NOA schedule that we often are provided with that shows an amortization component within the NOI because they are so capital intensive now. But currently, it's below the line in these NOI figures.
So there's nothing here that would reflect those occurrences.
Correct. Yeah, it's below the line on the NOI. Correct. But I think that component will change as we move forward in valuing these assets.
Go for it, Bob.
So as I'm looking at page 542, and it's the income summary and projection. And of the $76 million valuation, a portion of that, a portion of the lost value is associated with the ongoing, the kind of systemic trends. But a portion of this appears to be related to COVID. Is there a way to tease out how much the COVID impact was versus what you perceive to be the ongoing trend? We've capitalized an income projection here of $10,194,000, which is a substantial decline and more than the trend would suggest sans COVID. So I'm wondering if there's a way to tease out the obsolescence or the diminution in value that would be specifically related to the pandemic versus just the ongoing trend.
I think, Charlie, you'd probably be better served to answer that since it's related to your appraisal.
I'll give you my opinion. Agree or disagree, but I think the important thing here from a valuation perspective is this a permanent decline in income, or is this a temporary lull and it's going to resume back to 2019? If you saw the county's determination here, they decided to go back to the 2019 pre-COVID numbers and apply that 13% cap rate, and that's what the county board determined. I think my analysis from, talking to people that were selling these and doing the research in the report, and also, I get some of these CMBS filings, and the comments I'm getting is the regional mall space is rated the worst of the worst. I mean, it's even considered worse than what's happening in the hotel industry, because they believe the hotel industry is going to resume and recover. The regional mall space with the CMBS raters like Fitch and Moody's are saying, hey, we believe this is a permanent structural decline in the income, and we're seeing valuation write-downs in these CMBS assets of 30 to 40% for regional malls. So they have these things appraised frequently, and they update their analysis. It used to be, CMBS was one of the only ways to get a mall financed. If you're a B property and going downhill from there, you're not going to get CMBS financing right now, but those assets are stuck in these portfolios nonetheless. And that's what folks like Fitch and Moody's, that are, the guys that rate the financing that's used for these properties, are saying about the regional malls. So, my perspective is, hey, these guys know a heck of a lot more about the mall space than I am, and they're considering everything in the mix. They're looking at the online. They're also looking at competition from big box discount retailers. I mean, I was doing a Home Depot a few months back, and those guys are up 25% in their sales year over year. Well, you're looking at department stores at the subject property that were down 20 or 30% in their sales. And I think I've it was pointed out that all of the anchor tenants are still there. Well, Penny's just got out of bankruptcy, and they were bought by Brookfield and Simon to still maintain occupancy at their regional malls. If you read on, I have my other report up here. It's page 109 of my report. I don't know if you can give the SBE number, but I discussed some probabilities of bankruptcy in the next 2 years. Macy's is projected at a 38% probability of bankruptcy. JCPenney, just even after they emerged, is projected at a 48% probability of bankruptcy. So, I guess that's a chapter 22. I don't know, but the risk is being reflected in the market space, and it's impacting the capitalized income stream and the outlook that the market's seeing. If y'all go back to your, I know you got a few appraisers on the board, and remember the first course we took, it was the anticipation of future benefits is what dictates where the property is going. I think the important market players are saying, hey, that anticipation of future benefits right now for the regional mall space is no improvement in a permanent condition. So that was my opinion looking at it. So that I'll leave it at that, unless you have any other questions.
So as I'm looking at the income projection summary on page 542, what you're suggesting is that this trend that started out at with a net income in 2017 of 14,300,000, dropping to 12.4, 12.3, and then 10.2, this 10.2 number is really setting the new baseline, and that the trend will continue apace from there with no recovery back to the kind of the historic trend line, that this decline of 17% is a naturally occurring systemic problem, that we're going to assume that as the declines continue, this is our new baseline, that we are not, from looking at this, we're not going to go back and assume that there's going to be any recovery from COVID. This a shot across the bow that has reestablished a new basis for the continuing trend line in declines?
I think an important thing that Carolyn pointed out, and it's applicable here, is you have a lot of power centers and retail centers in that immediate area. She mentioned Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, all those, and you have to wonder, okay, they've experienced a little increase in vacancy too at some of those centers, but if you're an expiring tenant at Sunset Galleria, do you think maybe you want to go to where the anchor is experiencing an upward tick or a strong upward tick like a Home Depot or a Lowe's in sales revenue, or do you want to stick around in a regional mall where you've got 20, 30, 40% declines in revenues year over year in that same environment? I think once those leases expire, they're going to have a hard time maintaining pricing power in comparison to the community centers and power centers that populate that entire immediate area around Sunset Galleria. So I think that's going to be a really big challenge for them, and a lot of folks will probably side with the stronger tenants that are in that market space, that are more oriented towards the discounting and the big box orientation, that have anchors that are thriving.
I'm not sure, Charlie, do you have a copy of the entire SBE file that includes the information? So could you turn to page 823, and I know this is merely one piece of information, but we've got 3 or 4 pages from the Price Waterhouse survey for whatever value you want to attribute to that. And I'm wondering if you might want to provide some context for your 13% cap rate versus the information that Corpaz is presenting for the various retail components. One of the pages that I used to refer to in the Corpaz or Price Waterhouse was they had a matrix of asset quality that's not presented here. But they're reporting cap rates on average in the 6 to 7% range for these asset classes, but possibly not qualities. And I'm wondering if you might be up to kind of addressing those differences. Well, we lost your audio.
Sorry, I must, maybe I accidentally muted myself. Okay, if you look at that page, and I think Sean also brought this up at the upper right corner, you'll see that they rate the A+, the A, and the B+ properties. The B+ properties might have had a little condition, or maybe a vacancy or something, but these are in strong markets with the highest incomes and the highest profile tenants. And probably most importantly, the sales per square foot is what kind of drives the classification. So if you're B+, I have it in my report, but you're going to be well north of where the subject is currently performing at on sales per square foot. And I always, in fact, I just got a review last week from a bank reviewer who had some good points. We had kind of a mid-range asset. It's questionable whether it was institutional profile or not. And he's like, I see you got the PwC survey in here, but take a look at the back. They do publish some non-institutional asset quality stuff. Now, of course, this is for like office and industrial and some other property types. They don't do it for regional malls in the PwC, but If you know the history of the PwC report, it's really more geared towards institutional asset qualities. And, I think once you start getting to the B and you're going downhill, the C, you're really not capable of getting CMBS financing, and you're probably not going to be considered in that institutional quality asset profile. If I could, let me direct you to where I have it in my report. If you give me just a second here, I'm trying to do this quickly on the fly. I'll give you the SBE number. If you start at about SBE 505, for example, that's the Newmark Knight Frank analysis that I was able to acquire a copy of. That indicates, what's happening in a very limited spectrum for B or lower grade mall transactions right now. I mean, essentially, it's almost impossible to finance these. So now you're going to have an equity investor or some other specialty asset purchaser buy something that's not in the highest grade categories. You're just not going to see loans made on that sort of product. If you turn further to page SB 507, that's a pretty good rundown of where the asset classes fall based on the prices or the sales per square foot. If you see the inline tenant sales on page SB 507 or 115 of my report, I agree with that table. I think it's pretty accurate. The subject right now is actually performing in the Class C, but granted, it's due to COVID. But the question becomes: is the market anticipating that's a permanent structural condition, or is that a temporary condition that's going to resurge? I think the analysis I'm seeing is that it's the market itself. The big CMBS lenders are saying we're considering this a permanent structural condition. If you read the latest PwC emerging trends, and I've never seen this before. I used to work with Coopers and Lybrand before they merged with PwC, and I've never seen them be this pessimistic ever. They ranked regional malls abysmal on the development prospects and closer to abysmal to fair on the investment prospects. So, it's the worst of the worst if you read that objective source too. So all I'm saying is I think these players, know a few things about the market. If you page down a little bit further on pages SB 509, 510, 510, that's the analysis we obtained from Green Street on their database and ranking of the subject property, and that's they had a 12.9% cap rate conclusion for the subject gallery at Sunset. They don't have any dog in the hunt. They're just giving their objective analysis here.
Do you know any more about what Green Street's opinion or scope is based on? Is it something they provide to every mall and their opinion, or did they actually dig into this property and understand the rent rolls, the tenancy, the location, and offer an opinion of cap rate based on a more detailed scope of services?
Obviously I'm not an employee of Green Street. I did call over there to get their take on that. One of the guys I talked to says they generally put these out on a regular basis. It may be, as they can get to it, but typically at least once a year. I don't believe that they do it every single quarter. But again, I'm speaking from just a cursory conversation with the Green Street folks. I do know that they're pretty well respected in the industry, and a lot of mall operators use and subscribe to their figures and use it for their own in-house management, accounting, and valuation and operations decisions.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Yes. At this point, let's close the hearing and let's deliberate amongst ourselves. Where I'm at overall is very challenging, I think, to operate a regional mall today. No question about that. We get into this question, as I'm really seeing here, two different things I'm looking at. One, net income's falling every year, so it's what income do you choose to capitalize at what rate? There's an inverse relationship between higher cap rate, higher risk, but the price, if you're capitalizing a higher income, higher, lower cap rate type of thing, or lower income, higher cap rate. The second is, are we seeing enough signs here relative to the comparables that were presented that this is ripe for further reduction? And I don't know if I'm seeing them yet, with anchors leaving, with income substantially down. The 2020 income of 9.8 million still significantly above the assessor's projection of income of 8.5 million roughly. In one of the toughest environments, they're still performing, I mean, relatively well with all things considered. So is this something where more evidence needs to be presented relative to reduction in income, tenant anchors leaving before a higher cap rate is appropriate?
So when I look at it, I look at I do think that 2020 was, I just have this feeling that it was anomalous with the pandemic, and I would be tempted to attack this if I was appraising it in the same manner that some of the ones we viewed yesterday were attacked, where we developed a stabilized income based upon maybe the income projection or the income history for 17, 18, and 19 as set forth on page 542, and then do a separate deduction for the impact of COVID on the instant 2020's income, and how that would be resolved over time to capitalize the 2020 income into perpetuity. The 17% decline, in my mind, I don't think actually does the reset. It may, but I just have this feeling that as the world recovers a little bit, that we may, I would anticipate that we return to the original downward curve, and that this really, I don't feel that this would be a reset of the base of that curve.
I agree. I'm going to float something to get your ideas, and this is high level how I looked at it. I adopted the appraiser's net income of a little over 10 million, his projection. I don't think it's unreasonable. I think that there's arguments, but where I struggle is cap rate, and I look at that versus the assessed value, taxable value, and it indicates an 11% cap rate based on taxable value today. And is that 11% unreasonable based on what we know? And I don't think it is, given that they performed at pretty close to that level in 2020. There is significant risk, but an 11 cap rate still high. And if they start losing anchor tenants, start having further tenancy not coming through the door or increased vacancy, then maybe we start going higher, but I just don't see that risk yet today. And based on the data that's in there, is 11 unreasonable in my mind? No.
How do you reconcile that to the sales that the appraiser presented on page 505, which are all similar, similar magnitude, I would lean into those where the total square footage is, probably, I'm looking at, I'm not going to do the average, but the average looks to be someplace in the 500,000 square foot range. I think that those are more reliable and more indicative of the motivations of a buyer of a regional mall than some of the sales of the smaller properties in the local market. I just don't think that they attract the same purchaser profile.
And what I heard testimony to is all of those have lost anchor tenants where our subject hasn't. And that's where I drew a clear distinction, because you're operating one of these properties, you're buying it, and some of your anchors are gone. That's incredibly difficult to attract new tenants, and that puts you in a different risk class than the subject who still has all their anchors. And they may well lose some in the future, but they haven't to date. And I think that makes those sales dissimilar. That's how I looked at it.
So would that lead us more towards the upper end of the Class B malls on that table?
Yeah, there were at the lower end, I think and I'm not looking at it, the lowest was around 10, I believe. There was a sale up in Montana, Missoula at 10 cap. But we just don't know enough about some of those comparables. But it was the assessor that offered the information, they dug into it, and it wasn't rebutted anyway that all of those had lost their anchors. That was what the discussion turned on in my mind.
Okay, the chart I don't think, or the exhibit I don't think talks about that circumstance, but
and that was the assessor's criticism of it.
Yeah.
So Carol offered that, and I asked some questions relative to it because but it's very challenging, no doubt. This is a very challenging environment, but as income continues to go down, a higher cap rate isn't always appropriate because you're recognizing that risk as income falls, and that leads to a lower appropriate cap rate, in my opinion.
Well, if you look at it in the context of a discounted cash flow, if you take an instantaneous picture using a direct cap, there's an element of the future. I think it was the Elwood formula where there's a component of return that is future appreciation or depreciation, and when you've got future depreciation, then it has to be reflected in a higher cap rate. And if we're looking at an income trend that's downward, then in order to get the ultimate, over a protracted holding period, to get the returns that you demand, you have to, even on a property that is, I don't want to say stabilized because that gives the wrong connotation, but is living in the environment, is performing in the appropriately given its context, albeit in a declining trend, to get the returns that you demand. You have to raise the cap rate even on existing income because you're going to be losing value over time.
And it goes to, is it ripe to me because tenants are staying? Some of it might be a contract issue where they just can't get out of the lease, but a lot of those leases, the ones I've seen for mall tenants, there's out clauses for them, and people are choosing to stay because they believe in a brighter day. And if this changes the property, and we start to see, my litmus test would be increased vacancy, and that becomes an unsustained trend, this becomes a lot riskier. But to date, the income generated in 2020, I think, speaks volumes, and the fact they're able to go to percentage-only secondary tenants and sell if people want to come in and lease space, and they're able to generate income. All things considered, I don't think they did bad in 2020 relative to the broader market. If we were to look at regional malls and their net income for 2020 versus 2019, I'm fairly certain we'd find most properties that are similar scope to this would have a much greater decline in income from 2019 to 2020.
Bigger than the 17% reflected?
Yeah, my understanding is you have in a lot of cases, anchor is not paying. There's a lot of renegotiation that went on. There were a lot of tenants and a lot of malls that just chose to walk away. They had the ability through a gross sales clause, something else, to close up shop and walk away. These are very sophisticated, smart tenants, and they have the capacity to decide what's in their best interest, and they're choosing to date to stay in this mall by and large, and that spoke to me a lot.
Okay.
Which one of you should we make offer your opinion next? Oh yeah, we can do that. Go for it, Tyree.
Nah, happy to do so. And so my initial inclinations are that as you look at the trend, even again, as we've all discussed, retail outlets for a number of years, in fact, have been on a decline. I do believe that 2020 does have a bit of an anomaly in that you have a 3 to 4 month period where you had no business, frankly. But with that, I do agree that there are certain types of stores that are unique, and even the Assessor spoke to that. Like jewelry stores are very unique. As a person who's bought jewelry before, it's one of those things that you actually usually want to see. And so, I think you'll see that you'll have retail space that'll continue there. I'm influenced by just kind of the general business practices of, and again, not to pick a retail brand, but you tend to see Guess and H&M and things, they want to be close to each other because people will go into this store and then go into that store versus maybe per se move next to a Home Depot, as we kind of heard represented. And so my inclination is I am leaning toward reduction, but I am leaning toward a very slight reduction and recognizing that this is a very difficult asset. From an investment perspective, if somebody walked up to me personally, asked me if I wanted to get into a mall, I'd say no. So I'm influenced by that, but I do believe it really does kind of come down to, as your discussion is, to cap rate and how we can adjust that in order to make it equitable, and recognizing that we are here for today, and we recognize that tomorrow, being next year may be a very different story, but we have to be confined by the facts that we have in front of us today, and not necessarily trying to read the tea leaves.
So Ty, how would you get to a number? With the information that we have in front of us, one of the criticisms the board has had in the past is that we kind of pull these numbers. There have been occasions where we've pulled numbers out of tried to make this out of whole cloth. And so, one of the things that we've tried to do is put together a reasoned explanation for the number that we select. And so, do you have a thought process that we can go through mechanically to get to a number that you felt comfortable with?
I would say that I'm still kind of working that out, but I think similar to what your suggestion was yesterday, and kind of, I think almost what I heard you say today, is being able to look at 17, 18, and 19 and appreciate that there's been some level of decline in treating 2020 as an anomaly. And so whether that is meeting the 2020 and 2019 number kind of halfway or something like that, I do believe that there's some value in taking a look and again, not inventing a number, but trying to use logic and reasonable conclusion to get somewhere.
And just to help to talk it out, I think the assessor's net income opinion is 8.5 million, which does recognize some of the future anticipated decline. So that isn't assessor
8.5?
I believe. Go to page 771. Or am I looking at that wrong?
They were at 9 effective gross net income. So they were over $2 million less than. $531.
And I took that as the assessor's office trying to find a base level of income that they felt the property could generate going forward. And that is about $1.5 million less than the subject actually achieved last year.
But then they offset that by using
They used a 9% capitalization,
9%
so it
cap
comes
rate.
back to what is an appropriate capitalization rate. I just want to get the figures out as you start to think through, Tyree, what your motion may be, but I want to get Glenn's thoughts as well. Where are you at, Glenn?
I'm lost in the woods. But other than that, I think what we're trying to be asked to do is to project the recovery from the Amazon impact. And I think we're all trying to be as objective as possible, but there's a reasonable level. So maybe someplace in between the two is the appropriate place to be. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. So a little less, but not quite as much as being asked. But to come up with a mechanical way to justify it, I can't do that.
Where I might entertain, and I want to get your guys' thoughts, is if we use the assessor's net income, they used a 9% capitalization rate. Maybe a 10 would be more appropriate. I think there's data in there. That's the low end of the chart, I believe, on, was it 541, that sales chart? Appeared.
I think so.
And it might have been, I have the page number here. But I think we start to get into a range that's reasonable. I do think there's a ton of risk here. And if we're going to pick a higher net income and believe in that, then there's going to be more risk associated if we pick a lower, less. But I would feel comfortable. I think there's adequate data to support a 10% capitalization rate of the assessor's projected net income.
I think that's so that would result in a value of in the $84 million range, or 80.
It'd be 85 essentially, 84.99.
That I think that makes sense to me. I think for an asset category of this type, a 9% cap rate, given its history, I don't think allows an investor to recapture kind of the systemic decline over time, where that extra 1%, it may, in the cap rate. You know, it diminishes the value by roughly 10%, but still it seems as though it's within the range of information that's available to us.
Yeah, and I do, as I think this through, it is trying to catch a falling knife, and we don't know what the future is going to hold, and I agree with Tyree's point. It could be completely different next year. If they lose a couple anchors, they have tenants start non-renewing, risk profile, and at that point, maybe a 13, 14, 50% cap rate is appropriate, but based on what we know today, I think it's a reasonable path forward to use the assessor's income and then capitalize it at a 10% rate.
Can you share with me the page that the assessor's income projections on?
Page 771 is the assessor's income projection.
Mr. Chair, are you ready for a motion?
I am.
Does anybody have any comments before I make one?
I don't. I think that was a
That
thorough
was it.
discussion.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, in case number 21-143, I would move that based upon a review of the file and after considering the testimony herein that we've heard, that we reduce the value of the property to $84 million or $85 million. Is that right? Yeah, $85 million, which is the net operating income projected by the Clark County Assessor's Office of $8,499,575, and apply a 10% capitalization rate, which is 100 basis points higher than the capitalization rate used by the assessor, but is intended to reflect the returns required for a declining an asset class that is in decline. Doing that math, we end up with a value of $84,995,750, which I would round to $85 million.
I agree with that, and you're taking the difference out of the improvements, correct?
Correct, as obsolescence from the improvements.
Do we have a second for that?
I will second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments from the board? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Jeff, are you opposed to a 5-minute break before we call the next case? Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at a little after 10:40. let's go back on the record. Jeff, please call the next case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Agenda Item G for possible action, appeals from the action of a County Board of Equalization pursuant to NRS 361.400 for the 21-22 secured roll, 2021 unsecured roll. We are going to call case number 21-129, the Shower Family Trust, Shower Stephen and Julie. It is residential property. The petitioner is here in person, and the respondent is the Clark County Assessor. If the petitioner will come up to the desk. Notice of hearing can be found on page 133, and the Clark County Assessor's Office is here to orientate the property.
Please state your name for the record and then provide a brief orientation of the property.
Jesse Cruz, Clark County Assessor's Office, case 21-129. First off, I'd like to request pages 118 through 126 be omitted from the record as they are not part of this case. Additionally, I would like, it appears there's new evidence on pages 4 through 10, which were available at the time of hearing. However, they were not provided. So I'd like to object to that as well. This case will cover,
And please state your name for the record. and then
Stephen
let us-
Shower, 607 Scenic Rim. I don't know what he's referring to.
on pages 4 through 10, there are documents dated April 2020 from the builder detailing cost of the property.
That was submitted at the beginning when I did the original appeal. So you're saying that's going to be omitted?
The cost data was not submitted at the time. It appears to be new data.
And your representation is you submitted
I
it
did.
at the time you filed to the County Board of
I
Equalization.
did. Correct.
Jeff,
That's
How
the
do we-
exact same cost I had when I sent it in.
I'd like to get your guidance relative to how to best to proceed.
If you would give me a moment to review the file to make sure whether or not it was part of the County Board of Equalization's information.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready to go back on the record.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's go back on the record and let us know what you learned.
So, Jeff Mitchell, for the record, it appears as though those pages were not part of the county record that was submitted and forwarded onward, so it would be considered new evidence.
Michelle, you provided earlier, what is our standard review for admitting new evidence?
You have a regulation in NAC 361.739. It requires that in a hearing of an appeal of a decision of a county board, a party that wishes to introduce evidence that was not submitted to the county board in the first instance must satisfy the state board that the new evidence could not, by due diligence, have been discovered or secured before the final adjournment of the county board, and submit the evidence in writing to the state board and all parties of record not less than 7 business days before the hearing on the matter.
So it sounds to me like we met one of the two, which was submitted in writing. At some point this came in. I'm going to guess it was with your appeal to the state. But the second one is it couldn't have been reasonably available as of the date of the county board hearing. And it looked like it was dated in 2020, which would have been available at the time of the county board. So before we make a decision as a board relative to if we should or shouldn't accept it, I would take further comments from you relative to why we should admit
I
it.
brought this up when I went to the appeal meeting and I submitted it to them, and I did just submit the actual page. And it was referenced in the meeting that they don't know that this was accurate and they don't know that I got a deal from the builder. So that it's in the video. Actually, I don't know the number of it, but it's in there that says, how do we know that you didn't get a deal from the builder to build it at this and they just went off the appraisal value? It was referenced in there.
Board, we need to decide if we're going to admit or not admit the new evidence. I do think that he referenced in his testimony before the county board the cost. I do recall reading that in the minutes.
Yeah, on page 130, which is the minutes of the county board hearing, there is a discussion about the total cost. And so I don't know that including this additional information or excluding it really changes anything. It's further documentation of a number that is presented at the county board.
You're hanging out on the fence pretty well there. We have to admit it or not admit it.
I'm just saying that it's really just backup information for something that was already discussed. And so I think that including it in the in our consideration, having it presented and including it really probably doesn't change anything. And so it would be my inclination to include it, to allow it.
Is that in the form of a motion?
I move that we include the information that is presented in those earlier pages, page 4 through 7 or so.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Any further comment?
Yeah, just in the way of comment, I would like to concur with the analysis of the motion. I believe that this is, as we can see on the record, it was discussed, and so this would only be merely just be able to substantiate what was discussed at the record and not actually anything new that was not contemplated at the initial hearing. So.
Great. With all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. The new evidence is admitted. And with that petition...
Let's address the other exclusion, which is at the end of the file. I think it is starting on page SBE 126. It's addressing a completely different property.
Yeah, 118 through 126.
118 through 126 is addressing a property that's unrelated to this case at all.
Jeff, back to you. What do we do procedurally to clean up the record for extraneous information that appears to be presented at the end of the packet?
So that was the record submitted to us from the county clerk. If it is not related to this case at all, there was not an appeal filed to the state board on that information. It probably should not be considered as anything relating to this case.
And can we consider it as such and move forward, or, okay, well, that is irrelevant information for this case. I don't see any reason why the parties would consider it, but we don't need to do anything further in that regard. Please proceed in 15 minutes.
I still have to introduce.
Oh, you have an introduce?
Yes.
Okay, please introduce the property.
Jesse Cruz, County Assessor. This appeal covers 2 years, the 2021, of which we can, the appealable value will be the supplemental, and the 21-22, which is, everything is appealable. And the 21-22 has a appraisal date of January 1, 2021. The subject property is a newly constructed 2-story custom home with a 1,048 square foot garage, in-ground pool and spa with elevated city views located at parcel 17827716001 in the neighborhood of McDonald Highlands.
Clarifying question there. 21 supplemental would have a date of value of?
January 1st, 2020.
Correct, okay. And then the subsequent year, 21-22, would be January 1st, 2021.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure the record's clear. And with that, petitioner, first question for you. Were you sworn in this morning? Yes. Okay, great. Please proceed, and you've got 15 minutes to present your case.
Thank you. I'm just asking that my taxable value be per the definition, per what I saw in the NRS law and the Clark County.gov website. It just says the land plus the current replacement cost, which I provided. So it would be literally the 1.253 plus my cost of the land, which the total is 1.878890. And I provided the information on that. You quite honestly, impossible to go off the appraisal value because it was done, the appraisal value is today. I built this and I paid for all the materials a year and a half, 2 years ago. So it was, again, land plus replacement costs.
Anything further? Are you available for questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. As I look through the costs here, was there a general contractor's fee?
Yes, there was. 12,
okay, that's
12%.
the last line item.
12%.
So this is your house, I assume?
This is. Correct.
Okay, and you hired an independent contractor to build it. You entered into a contract, it looked like, in early 2020 to construct this.
I entered a contract in 2019.
2019 to build that?
Correct.
Okay.
I purchased the land 2 years previously. I believe we closed in 2018. I purchased it before that, and then it waited to get the road going up to get assessed, and then I closed on the land.
Okay.
And that sale price was about $590?
It was $590, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions from the board at this time? Assessor, please proceed.
Yes, I'd like to point out that the assessor does use the cost method, and per law, we're using the Marshall and Swift valuation services, which we do test to market. So we don't typically take builder's cost. Right. On page 86, sales analysis of 2021 tax year. The sales analysis utilizes 5 recent comparable sales, all from the subject subdivision. Comparable 5 is from an older part of the same subdivision. And assessor recommendation for the 2021 year is holding value at $2,131,688.
Jamie Jacobs for Clark County. Jamie, Jayme, Jacobs, Jacobs. I just wanted to kind of further emphasize the statutory requirement to use Marshall and Swift costing service as it is stated in the law. And that's a couple of different reasons. Obviously, costs continue to go up typically year over year. So even though the petitioner testified that this cost for 2019, obviously our first valuation date is January 1st of 2020. And then the subsequent year is January 1st of 2021. So utilizing this Marshall and Swift costing service, the costs are adjusted year over year, as well as for equity, because some people might do certain things to their house is different and might cost slightly different than others. For one to be administrative nightmare to just utilize what people pay in costs for the properties. And so by utilizing a standardized Marshall and Swift costing service, it also provides equity throughout the county. So the big factor with residential costs, the handbook that we use for Marshall and Swift is the quality. So in their standard residential handbook, it goes from low quality all the way up to excellent quality. And then beyond that, then they have a high value home manual, which would be above and beyond that. And a lot of the homes in McDonald Highlands and McDonald Ranch are out of the exceptional home or high value home manual. But we actually are, the quality that we apply to the subject is still within that first manual of the excellent plus quality. So we feel it's a reasonable quality to apply to the subject. And it is, like I said, typically less than some of the other homes in the area.
Any questions from the board?
Since we're combining these two cases or the two tax years, there's a substantial increase in the land value between 2020-21 and 21-22. Can you walk us through the land value analysis a little bit?
Okay, for the 21-22 value, we would like to stay with the county board, and the county board did reduce the land to 625.
Okay.
So the total on the 21-22 is $2,128,829.
Can you refer me to that page,
That will be
please?
page 36.
Is that the decision letter?
No.
Page 36 was the sales analysis.
Okay.
So to answer that question, so the board kind of addressed the land issue, and obviously the petitioners, based on the appeal form for the state, he didn't even mention the land. So as far as we're concerned, the land portion is kind of been settled by the county board because they did adjust the land value. And of course, the previous year for the supplemental year, the land wasn't appealable because it had already been noticed as a secured roll value, and they couldn't appeal that. So that's why in that year the land was left at $650,000.
Okay.
I just don't understand why I pay more if I closed on the land at $590.
Yeah, and
I don't get
that.
that.
Yeah, you'll have 5 minutes and we can talk about that. It's their turn, but question for you. It's a really small difference, but in the decision letter, SBE 129, I appear to see a value for 21-22 of $2,131,688. That's on the record.
That's the decision letter also.
Okay.
On page 34.
And that's the correct.
That's the 2021 supplemental.
That's supplemental, okay.
And I'm still looking for the 21-22 closed roll.
And that's really small. It's about a $3,000 difference. I just want to make sure I understand what's going on for the 21 to 22
Yeah,
tax
again, I
year.
think because of the board just lowered the land, they left the improvement value the same. So whatever the county board concluded to, that's what we're agreeing to. We're not protesting that at all.
Okay.
So the decision letter, if you'll refer to page 84 of the SBE 84, it looks like for 21-22, the land value was $750 per the decision letter.
So that decision letter was not signed by the petitioner, so he didn't agree to that?
Oh, no, but the current assessment that's being appealed for 2021 or 21-22, does it contemplate a land value of 625 or 750?
625, and that should be in the minutes.
That is. And And I think the minutes are reflected at that 2.1 million. This was a $2.25 million.
But we've got two dates of value, or two
This is
values
21,
circumstances.
22. Correct.
And the decision later on page 85 or 84 addressed the 21, 22 valuation.
I think 21, 22 is 625,000 for the land.
Yeah, and page 129 is the minutes where the board decided to reduce the land
Oh, okay.
to 625, and for a total value of $2,131,688. So that was the county's final decision, reflective of taking into account the reduction in land.
Can you guys talk to me a little bit about construction costs and what's happened from 2019 to January 1st of 2021 relative to the cost of construction for similar houses in this market area?
So what we've seen over the past few years since the recession is an increase in cost year over year, and that varies obviously again on the quality, but typically I'd have to look at the numbers. I think one year it was like 5%, and then this last year 8%. So it does increase. I don't certainly see the cost going down. And I don't know if you've shopped recently at Home Depot, but prices shot up 300%. So it's so yeah, they're continuing to go up, and that's why we utilize this Marshall and Swift cost method, is because it does account for the increase in cost year over year, rather than locking into some costs that a particular owner paid, and it just stays that way. No, we use the costing method as for equity purposes as well. If that answers your question.
It does answer my question. Any other questions from the board of the assessor's office? Seeing as, Bob.
Just bear with me just a second. Let me. Maybe Jeff, could you direct me to the decision letter from the county board? I just can't put my finger on it.
It doesn't appear as though the decision letter was submitted as part of the record.
Okay, well, that explains that. Okay, I'm okay.
We are back to the petitioner for up to 5 minutes of closing. Anyone else?
When I appealed it, I mentioned that, again, I kind of feel had I bought the house directly from the builder and paid $1.89 million for it, $1.9 million, I would be assessed at $1.9 million. And I would mention, and it's on the video, that one of the board members said, well, you should have did that then, shouldn't you? It is on the video, by the way. I said, obviously, if I had known that, because I feel that realistically, I bought it, I should pay for what I bought it for. And I built it exactly for this amount. I paid $590 for the land, I should be taxed at $590 for the land. I built it for $1.253 million, and I should be taxed at that assessment. There are other houses in there. There is one right down the road that was assessed exactly at that as well. So I feel that we're not talking gigantic, but this is setting my base on this as well. This is my house. I occupy it. Don't plan on selling. I didn't build it. It was also mentioned, well, how do we know you didn't build it for profit? I didn't build it for profit. And I didn't know, nobody knows that lumber and values are going up. Nobody builds, again, I didn't build it to go, oh my gosh, I'm going to get X amount of equity into it. It was also mentioned, well, you could sell it for more. That's not the point. The point is I built it for what I paid for it. I should pay for taxed what I paid for it, in my opinion.
So unfortunately, statute differs in the method that these properties are appraised for taxation. The model for Nevada taxation is the current market value as of the date of value, the lien date, which in this case, let's assume the 21-22, which is January of 2021, the market value of the land at that time, irrespective of what you paid for it, the market value at the time for land to be put to the use that you put it to. So it's a residential lot. It's being used as a residential lot. So what the assessor is alleging is that its market value at the time of sale or at the date of value is $625.
I can agree with the land. Honestly, we're not talking much on the land.
Well, no, but the process is important because that's what's set out in the statute. So it's the market value of the land at the date of value plus the depreciated replacement cost new of the improvements based upon the calculations for mass appraisal using Marshall Valuation Service. There are people who, for whatever reason, end up paying more than Marshall Valuation Service. There's people who pay less than Marshall Valuation Service, but because the goal is to tax people equitably across the entire range of properties, they use the standardized cost estimating system that benefits some people and operates to the detriment of others. And with new construction, there are going to be differences. The cost estimating publication is sort of an average, sort of a trend, but it's what statute requires of us. And then that number is compared to the market value to determine at that time to determine whether that calculation exceeds or is less than the market value. And so we are to a great degree constrained by statute in terms of having to use this mechanism for estimating the replacement cost new of the improvements.
Unless I provide the replacement cost. I provided it. So it says what the actual build/replacement cost is.
The difference, and it's an unfortunate difference in this case, some of the time it benefits, sometimes it's a burden, it's what a typical person could expect to achieve, and that's why they use an index to set, essentially to prevent this exact problem of some of the time it's going to cost a little bit less than the average cost, some of the time it's going to cost a little bit more to build a house. They use one service to set that figure for replacement cost, and that is Marshall Valuation Service. And if someone's able to build a house for less, for whatever reason that may be, there just isn't anything in statute that allows for that benefit to also translate to a tax perspective, because they're using the average cost based on a national index.
I don't recall seeing, though, you had to use, it just said replacement cost in the statute. It says that part of it, so.
Further, it will specify them to use Marshall and Swift as a method to establish replacement cost. That is in their statute as what they have to use, is my understanding.
I'm assuming there might be some version of, okay.
And Jeff, is that something you could quickly point us to where the county assessor is directed to use Marshall and Swift to establish replacement cost new?
Thank you. Jeff Mitchell for the record. It is actually in regulation. So replacement cost new less depreciation is talked about in statute, and regulation specifies that it needs to be Marshall and Swift. And I believe it is NAC 361.1177.
Replacement cost new, which I provided.
Statute requires replacement cost new, and then the states come up with regulations to interpret statute, and the regulations dictate that the assessor is to use Marshall and Swift to determine replacement cost new. So they give the method in regulation.
So had I just bought it from the builder and just bought it for $1.9 million, I would just be taxed at that. I think I would. I mean, that,
No,
yes, that
because
sets the price
builder
of the house.
The builder would have gone through the same process where they built that identical house. Clark County isn't going to take what the builder said it cost to build if they're significantly different.
Had you buy a house from anybody, that sets the assessed value of the house, correct, when you purchase a house?
No.
I mean,
Not in Nevada.
Not in
Nevada
Nevada.
does not reset values
well, actually,
based
correct.
upon
Nevada
sale.
does not reset the values of the.
California does,
Correct. I
other
understand.
states
that. I
Gentlemen,
understand that.
please.
But on new homes,
Oh, sorry, we need to talk one at a time, but go ahead with your question.
that assesses the value because you have a purchase price of it.
That, what the assessor would do in a similar situation, my understanding is same exactly in the ones through here. They would take land value and then they'd go use Marshall and Swift. So if a builder had built your house and sold it for 1.8 million, all in, the assessor would have come and they would come in at the same amount. Maybe there'd be an argument then that it's overassessed based on a sale price, but we haven't crossed that bridge here. And I don't, somewhere in there, and you got the benefit during rising construction cost time period where you agreed to this prior to the lien date, construction costs have gone up substantially.
I don't think construction costs going up matters on this scenario, honestly. I mean, that's beside the case. I built it when I built it, not because I knew the construction costs were going up. So, yeah, I'm asking for it to be lowered. I mean, it should be, quite honestly, it's not fair, in all fairness. It's not. It should be lowered according to what I paid for the property. And there are others on that street that are assessed lower.
Are they similar houses or were they?
Very, very.
Same builder?
Same builder.
Any other questions, Bob? It looks like you're looking for something.
I'm just looking at the revised stat, or the,
NAC,
yeah.
the regulation that dictates. Do you want me to wait for you to look to see if a question comes as a result of your review?
Yes.
Okay, let's wait for Bob to further review NAC.
Jeff, can you refer me to the NAC chapter referencing Marshall Valuation Service? I found the one for personal property, but I've not found the reference for real property.
So NAC 361.1177, the Marshall and Swift valuation services are adopted by reference and available for cost, and then it is referred to in various manners throughout regulation to use those Marshall and Swift as adopted by reference for the current year for valuations.
So the 1177's got just the reference to each of those documents, But then, can you refer to me to the section that talks specifically about the valuation of real property, the cost estimates, and then, I'll accept the reference, but I'm looking for that specific calculation or reference.
Yes, I believe it is NAC 361.128 when it talks about the improvements and the calculation of the cost of a replacement.
128. So I'm just going to read this into the record real quick. NAC 361-128, subparagraph 2B, for other improvements, use the standards in the cost manuals, including modifiers of local cost, published through or furnished by Marshall & Swift Publication Company as they exist on October 1st of the year preceding the closure of the roll for the appropriate assessment year. And so, this clearly describes the method of calculating the replacement costs, and it's set forth in the NAC. The cost that you incurred is not reflected in an accepted method of calculating the taxable value.
And then how do I justify that there's another house that was built without implication of the other house that is taxed less than mine?
That's an equalization argument, and we don't have sufficient evidence in front of us, but there is a process to challenge equalization. You should be taxed similar, an equity argument to similarly situated properties. But we just don't have the information in front of us with that board with the specific facts to offer any type of opinion here today, based on what I've seen relative to an equity argument in equalization with a similar
I
situated
brought that up
house.
before when I was at the appeal part of it, and it was just brushed off as well. So I'm very similar on the other house. They're assessed less than what I'm asking, in all honesty.
Is that, I'm looking at a table of sales that appear to have been provided, or taxable values that appear to be provided by you, I think, that appears on SBE 28?
Correct. It's not one of those properties now.
Oh, the one you're referring to is not on this list?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
It was a new set. It was a new build. But my problem, I don't want to sit there and say that and, oh, that's too low. That's been assessed already, so I don't know. My position, I don't want to implicate them or bring them up and say, wow, here's your tax. How come your taxes are lower and mine are higher? That just doesn't make sense to me.
Unfortunately, that's an argument that's going to be made. That's how it has to be made, because the information has to be in front of us. We have to make our decision based on something. We have to be looking at a similarly situated house and say, that is in fact similarly situated. We've got to give the assessor's office the right to tell us why that house is or is not similarly situated.
Then they'll have to reappeal that, yeah.
But that is an argument that we do here. We do assign merit. If there's merit, we make the appropriate decision there. But the hearing today was over construction costs. And the challenge is that regulation didn't give us the ability to say the less of replacement costs new, or
but you're
construction
using
costs or Marshall & Swift.
You're using something that was a year and a half after I constructed it. You're using a scenario after I'm done with it. Oh, by the way, we're higher. Hey, everything's higher, so let's just tax them more because it's all higher.
But that happens if for a lot of properties throughout the state, their improvement values actually go up every year because they're going back to Marshall & Swift and construction costs have risen. So it's happening across the board to properties that have
Hence the
already been
reason I should be
constructed.
taxed on the time that I built it. It's just
That just unfortunately isn't the way statute reads.
Then let's go back to the use of Marshall and Swift a year and a half ago, off
but-
those terms when it was done a year and a half ago, not current.
But we have to use the lien date because that's what our regulations provide that we do, so it's uniform and consistent. Unfortunately, I do see where it's hard to swallow. I built this house for, essentially, I'm all in 1.843 million, and I'm being taxed at something in excess of that. I see where that would be hard to swallow, but I think a lot of it's caused by the difference in timing, and they're using the same timing for houses throughout Clark County to establish that replacement cost new as their basis for it, and there has to be equity in the date used for each assessment year.
I have one.
Okay.
I look here on page 68, the comparable sales analysis, 2020, 2021, and the numbers associated with the comparable sales would lead me to believe that this recommended value is pretty much right on.
And I want
Am I wrong, or is that it's what the comparable houses are selling for?
Our challenge with that is also, they've all gone up dramatically after I built.
Has yours gone up too?
Absolutely.
And I want to,
but that's not the issue here.
I want
that has no that's not relevant to the scenario. The scenario is, I didn't build it to go up in value. Now, we could have done the 100% reverse of that, right? And you still would have taxed me on the same amount. So regardless of the value of the house, I'm not getting taxed on what, if I sold it, I'm paying capital gains. That's a different tax, guys. We all know that. Okay, so I'm not getting taxed on what the value of the home is. I'm getting taxed on what I paid for the home.
and Glenn, to your comment, the taxpayer gets a benefit of the lower of replacement costs new, less depreciation plus land, versus what the comparable sales indicate. So in this case, the comparable sales clearly indicate a higher value, but the property owner is getting the benefit of the lower approach, which is replacement cost new, less depreciation, that's the way it should be, and that's our primary method to establish value. And then any further benefit, if statute and regulation allow, I want to give, but I'm just not sure where our hands are tied here with statute and regulation for how to determine replacement cost new. Any other?
Okay, I'm just saying, I know that my home, years are different, but my home is now, comparable homes are selling for 3 times what I paid for my house. What am I being taxed at? What I paid for it, or what?
What you paid for it.
I am being
No,
taxed.
what you pay for the house.
Well, you're not being taxed at what it's valued at right now, though.
No.
And I want to clear
Correct.
that up.
No.
What you're being taxed on, most likely, the purchase price is not directly relevant in Nevada to how you establish taxable value. What the county is going to use, their primary approach, is what's the current opinion of the land value. So that changes every year based on sales, plus the replacement cost new as determined by Marshall and Swift for that year, less statutory depreciation at 1.5%. So that's going to determine the value of your house, and what you paid for it and what it's worth can be significantly different, and that's a burden for our tax scheme that we have here in Nevada, but that's the one we use, and it should be fairly applied throughout the state, which Clark County is clearly fairly applying this methodology in what I'm seeing.
Okay.
Any other questions before we close it? Okay, well, let's close it, and then let's get thoughts of the board relative to what we should do here.
It's my thought that the assessor has conformed with statute in establishing the taxable value of the property. I do not believe that the taxable value exceeds the property's current market value based upon the information that's available. And that holds for both tax years, both the supplement 2020 2021 and 21-22. And so I don't see an avenue or reasoning for a reduction based upon the board's interpretation of statute.
Yeah, and I mean, I very much understand here where it's difficult to stomach having paid a lower price than you're being taxed on. But one of the key variables is time, and that's being similarly applied throughout the county, and construction costs were going up, and for the relevant tax years they have to use what the current cost data is, and following the statute, I don't see any way to deviate from it. I think it's pretty clear.
Yes, I tend to agree with the analysis, and again, I didn't have any questions, so these are more comments for the board. As we consider, I mean, I think it is a known fact that land becomes more valuable as services get to their I mean, as the petitioner said, you have to wait for the road to get there, as sewer and all those lines. And then the other side of that is scarcity. Based upon where those are particular lots, and the land will continue to appreciate as those lots become more scarce. In addition, I mean, the concept is that we should always have a uniform method of how to replace or how to value things. Again, we can't be dependent on, an individual's ability to negotiate, whether a good negotiation or bad. Generally, government will not interfere with contracts and your ability to negotiate within that.
The problem is these are all opinions.
And so
the downside's all
and
opinions.
I respect that you have additional comments, sir, but at this time, this is for our time for us to be able to deliberate.
And I'm not allowed to put any comments. Okay, go ahead.
And so, again, where we have if you would have built your house today, that
I'm
house
not
would have been.
talking about
But again,
today.
I agree with
No
you.
further comments.
Please don't bring up today again.
Any further
that has no
comments?
But
bearing.
this is where we, as a state, we assign value on a particular date, not on the date in which it was built, not on the day in which it was paid for. We pick a date and time, and we say, this is the value of the land based upon our best estimates. This is the value of the replacement costs on our best estimates. And then we have a depreciation cost, which is statutory. All of these processes are well laid out within our statutory and mechanism and our scheme here through the regulations. And so, where, again, if I decide to build my own house out of my own labor, I can say that, okay, well, I only paid X amount of dollars for this house because I built it out of my own labor. I don't receive the benefit of me actually doing that labor, because that is the way in which the statutes and the regulations interact with one another. And so having that uniform method is really important. And again, sometimes the pendulum will swing to the left, other times it will swing to the right. But the idea is that, we'll always have, a center point.
I think an example could be the home that I live in. It was built in the early 1970s, and the lot, I think, was roughly $5,000 to purchase. And I think the house was built for about $64,000. And in this case, the problem is that the date that the land was acquired and the date that the home was constructed is so close to it's within a couple of years of the date of value. But if you extend that out, then the inconsistency of that argument, the argument could be made, well, my lot, when it was purchased, was only $5,000 and the cost of my house was only $64,000, but it's not reflective of current conditions. For that home to be replaced, the lot would be, $100,000 and the cost of construction would be $400,000 or $500,000 under current circumstances. And that's the way that the tax regimen is set up. In California, it's different. In other states, it's different. But we've got this very unique, absolutely unique taxation scheme that is intended to provide uniformity, and the petitioner brought up a property that we don't know what property it is. There may be extenuating circumstances that we're unaware of that resulted in different taxation for those two properties, but we don't have any information on that property. At this point, it looks like the assessor has done what statute requires of them.
Any further comments, Glenn? I am ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, in case number 21-129, I move that we uphold the values established by the County Board of Equalization.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further comment from the board?
I would, in terms of comment, I think that, this is a unique situation. And this is a time where, where we're allowed to speak a little bit. Again, I think that the county did a wonderful job in regards to making sure that they followed the statutes and the regulations that were laid out before them. Now, the taxpayer and the homeowner may feel some burn from that. And that, is an unfortunate outcome, but this board is required to uphold the statutes and the regulations. And we're not an operation of necessarily equity, unless, again, there was an opportunity to have discussion around another property that is similarly situated. And, again, my counsel, I shouldn't say counsel, the taxpayer has the opportunity to do that, has the opportunity to engage in those conversations with the county. And I think that if that merits, then that should happen. But today, I believe that a lot of discussion was had on this item. I think that the board really wrestled with this item, but at the end of the day, we're confined to the statute and the regulations, and as such, when the roll is called, I will be a yay.
With that said, I really appreciate those comments. I concur with them. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Jeff, please call the next case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next case under Agenda Item G is case number 21-128, Sweet Success, LLC. It is multifamily property located within Clark County. The petitioner is Aaron Ben Shamochin, who is available on Zoom, and the respondent is the Clark County Assessor. Proper notice of hearing can be found on page 65 of your packet.
Thank you, Jeff. Clark County, please orient us to the property.
Good morning, or still morning. Jill Wood at the Clark County Assessor's Office. This is actually an equity appeal. The subject is the Manor Suites. It's an extended stay property located at 7230 South Las Vegas Boulevard, just north of Warm Springs Road at the south end of the Las Vegas Strip. The property contains 259 units, is situated on 4.61 net acres, and the improvements were constructed in 2001 and they're in good condition for their age. The amenities include a swimming pool and kitchens in every unit. Based on the data, the assessor recommends no change to the closed roll value of $13,726,173.
Thank you. Petitioner on the line, were you sworn in this morning?
Yes.
Great. Well, please state your name for the record, and then you've got 15 minutes to present your case.
Okay, thank you. My name is Erin Ben Samakan. I'm here on behalf of Sweet Success LLC. I work directly for the owner of the company. I do apologize if I cut out at all. I'll try, hopefully the internet stays up during my speech here. I'm not submitting any new evidence. I'm just going to reiterate what I spoke to at the local board and hope that you'll reconsider our case. I did submit the financial statements for the 2019 and 2020 time periods, as well as two comparable properties on Las Vegas Boulevard in regards to location, property size, and clientele. As you can see from the financial statements, 2020's revenue had decreased over $142,000 versus the previous year of 2019. This decrease in revenue was due to the COVID-19 pandemic. More specifically, the eviction moratorium really hit us hard as a landlord. We did not have a lot of help, and we still cannot evict for non-payment. We are still facing the CDC moratorium, even though the Nevada moratorium has ended. I did show our occupancy and our past due percentages in 2019 and 2020 in the packet I provided. Our past due percentage is typically 3%, maybe 4% at the highest. And we saw a 15 to 16% delinquency past due percentage at the property, which is unheard of since we were built at all. So that really decreased our revenue in 2020. I also provided two comparables on Las Vegas Boulevard. Our two biggest comparable properties are the Budget Suites and the Siegel Select Suites. Siegel Select being right next door to our property. We have very similar clientele, very similar units. Our market rents are similar. We actually base our rent off of their comparables as well. And both of their properties are being assessed at $50,607 average, where we're at $52,792. And I did bring this to the attention of the board as well as the financials, and was just told that that's not the approach they were taking, and that there's sufficient evidence with the type of approach that they were taking and something they could do. So we felt that our taxable value on a terrible year that we had should not go up. It did go up $290,000. We felt it should at least stay the same or go down due to the information I provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this time? Seeing as none, Clark County, please proceed.
Thank you. Let's address the equity portion first, if I may. NRS 361-356 states that an owner may appeal if the subject property is assessed at a higher value than another property that has an identical use with a comparable location. Inequity is kind of hard to prove in commercial property because square footages are different, wall heights are different. It's not like having a residential house where you both have Plan A's right next to each other and they're assessed at different values. Erin has always been very professional. She gives me her comps. Every year I analyze her comps. If you go to State Board page 51, that's an exhibit I kind of put together for ease of analysis that kind of breaks down her comps compared to the way we're required to appraise per statutes. So the subject property does have 259 units. Her comp one has 316. The subject property is smaller. And comp two, which is a Siegel Select located right next door, is almost half the size of hers, and it's way smaller at 156 units. And as you can see on the total gross building area, the subject property kind of falls right in the middle of comp one and comp two. The year built, we're built in 2002, and when I say we, I mean the subject property. And the other two are built in 2001, and by statutory depreciation, which we've talked a lot of this past couple of days, is 1.5% a year. So the subject property does not have as much depreciation by statute as the other two. So in other words, this property is a little younger. Same zoning, the land size varies significantly from we're 4.61 and comp one is 4.87, comp two is 2.58. The land value, however, is assessed equitably at $17,000 per unit. So when you take the $17,000 per unit and you multiply it times the number of units, you're going to get variances in the land value. Just, it's inherent. The price per square foot based on RDE, based on cost for Marshall and Swift, with given various components such as rank, wall height, roof tile, heating and cooling, amenities, we come up with for the subject as $74.80. Comp 1 has a replacement cost new of $83.32, and Comp 2 is a replacement cost new of $79.08. The subject falls really below that range. So when you look at a price per unit on a replacement cost new less depreciation, or a replacement cost new not including the depreciation, the subject is assessed at $35,997. Comp 1, $36,729. Comp 2 is $33,498. Again, we fall right in the middle of Comp 1 and Comp 2. But when you add all those individual analysis together, we do fall towards the upper end of the range. We have a larger land value, we have more units, and we have a larger price per square foot than Comp 2. So we don't believe that there's really any inequity. Do you have any questions regarding the equity portion? Because I'd like to address Erin's concerns about her collection loss.
Okay, question, and I just want to be clear. The land value you've established is price per unit, and you've used $17,000 a unit for all three of these.
Yes.
So land, you are identical.
Yes.
It all falls into
It is all
improvement.
equitably assessed. It's
Okay.
all differences in improvements and how the buildings are ranked and the type of improvements which are situated on that property.
Okay, and it sounds like a lot of the difference relates to accrued depreciation statutorily and the in numbers that the petitioner is looking at.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Actually, the majority of the difference appears to be in unit size.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's, I think the first thing is
subject
unit size.
The
Yeah.
subject is 481 square feet per unit average, and comps 1 and 2 are 440 and 423.
Yeah, the price
And
per
so
unit.
the price per unit is reflected in the larger unit size, which I've not done the math exactly, but that may relate to the total unitary value.
And that was my interpretation as I looked at it. But with that, any other questions from the board relative to the equity argument? No, please proceed.
Okay. So I would like to address Erin's collection issues, and we absolutely wholeheartedly empathize. They are providing housing to a segment of the area residents, which is absolutely needed. And with the state moratorium and the federal moratorium on evictions, landlords are struggling. So we looked at, she's always given me really comprehensive financial packages. And if you turn to State Board page 19, this is Manor Suites' actual profit and loss statements from January to December. They have an effective gross income of $3,817,000. And I'm just going to use round numbers, so $3,718,000. Their expenses have always been in line. It's a very well-run property. And my direct capitalization summary is on page 42 of the State Board packet. So if I take their actuals and their historical occupancy of 95%, their ancillary income, which is historical at 4.7, their expenses at 45% of EGI, cap it at a super conservative 9, which that's unheard of for multifamily type units because we all know that they're between 4 and maybe 6 or 7 at the outset. But giving this one the benefit of the doubt and then deducting the closed roll value for the FF&E of $148,000, I come up with a capitalized value of $23,175,000. The closed roll value is $13,726,173. Let's play devil's advocate and let's assume EGI is the same or potential gross is the same. And let's do a 30% vacancy and collection loss. That's giving them the benefit of the doubt of an extra 20-some% to allow for collections, using the same ancillary income, same expense ratio, and let's cap it at 7. And then a deduction for FF&E, I'm still north of $19 million, which still upholds the closed roll taxable value of 13. Even if I, again, go lower on the occupancy, giving it another 15, 20% for collection issues, I'd have to adjust the cap rate down to show the upside potential in the income stream. So again, we have that inverse, right? We can't capitalize a unstabilized property. We have to reflect the growth in the income with the lower capitalization rate. So no matter how I try to look at it, you know, being fair and equitable, I just can't get below the 13,716,000. And there really was no inequity in the comparables, because there's nothing truly comparable. While they are operating similar, that's a business decision. So they're similar operations with the extended stay model. They're not identical properties.
Anything further, Marianne? Okay. Any questions of the board? Okay. Let's go back to the petitioner for their 5 minutes of closing.
Thank you. I do understand, you know, what the assessor is saying, and I do appreciate the time she spent on this. I do believe with the budget suites property in particular, it is a larger property, 1 year older. I just can't see how the per unit price for, you're saying 40 square foot difference for another 60 units is such a difference. To me, that doesn't make sense. We've always looked at a per unit comp with the comparable properties in the area. And I just feel like I'm showing you a similar property. I'm showing you a similar comp. I'm showing you a decrease in the revenue, and we have an increase in value. So that just, to me, doesn't make sense. And I feel like I'm proving what we're supposed to prove here to ask for a lower value. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Aaron? Seeing as none, let's close this and deliberate as a board. I do think that SBE 51 is important here in looking at price per square foot of gross building area and price per unit for replacement cost is very helpful. And as we'll see, we're at the high end of replacement cost per unit, but then we're at the low end of price per square foot, and that's because the average unit size is larger for the subject. But welcome any further comments from the board. Glenn, give us your thoughts.
I think that the county has done a decent job of trying to determine the value and taxable value of the property. I haven't heard anything to make me want to change my opinion.
Bob, what are your thoughts?
I'm in concurrence. I look at the income capitalization page 42 and the resulting value of $23 million in that calculation. And we're in a situation where, while the value of the property may have been diminished as the result of the COVID pandemic, the diminution in value is reflected in the market value, and I believe the market value of the property still exceeds the taxable value. And as a result, I don't think that a diminution, while I do agree that the value of the property has probably dropped, it has not dropped below the calculated taxable value, and so no, in my view, no adjustments warranted.
I concur with that. Tyree, what's your thoughts here?
No, I can. Pardon me. I concur with that. The opinions of my colleagues here. I do agree that with the petitioner, I understand that there has been a reduction, particularly in rents collected. Again, I think yesterday when we had a similar conversation around that, we kind of a little bit out of left field asked a little bit about PPP and other rental assistance programs and different things like that, that maybe we're able to make people a little more whole. So I agree with the analysis again of my colleagues. I think that this is equitable, and hopefully, knock on wood, we don't see what we saw in 2020 continue to reflect through 2021. So you won't be back here next year. But if that is the case, then I think that'll be a suitable time to have a more detailed conversation around this property.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm ready for a motion if anyone's so inclined to make one.
Mr. Chairman, in case number 21-128, I move that we accept the value established by the county board, or the County Board of Equalization, of $13,726,123, which was no change in taxable value from the assessor's calculation, acknowledging that the value of the property from a market perspective probably has diminished as the result of the pandemic, but it has not dropped below the calculated taxable value.
Slight modification, if you will. I believe you said 123 is the last three digits. I believe it's 173.
I apologize. So that number is the correct number is $13,726,173.
Is there a second for Bob's motion?
A second.
Any further comment from the board? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Jeff, please call the next case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Agenda Item G, next case is 21.148. Richard G. and Leslie Otley is the petitioner. This is residential property located in Lincoln County. Proper notice of hearing can be found on page 89. This has been stipulated, and there is a stipulation that has been submitted as a secondary file. And with that, the assessor was not available. I can orientate the property a little bit and present the stipulation for your consideration.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jeff Mitchell for the record, Deputy Director of the Department of Taxation. This is residential property located in the town of Panaca. It was brought forward to the County Board of Equalization, where the taxable value was upheld. Subsequently to that, information was provided to the county assessor indicating damage to the property due to settling, and a stipulation was agreed and a value was set upon. And that stipulation is before you for consideration.
Wonderful. Petitioner, do you have any comment to add? And you're muted right now.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I missed that first part of what you just said. I'm really sorry. What was it that you just said?
Jeff, can you please repeat what you'd said?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I just said that this property was originally brought forward to the County Board of Equalization, where the value was upheld. But subsequently to that, so after the county board, information was provided that indicated that there was settling on the property, and the assessor agreed that there should be a reduction in value, and that reduction is presented before the state board in a signed upon stipulation. So we're asking for the agreed value with the stipulation.
Yeah, thank you.
And are you in concurrence with that, petitioners, that you guys agree with the stipulation? It's something you guys negotiated and are willing to accept?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll bring it back to the board to make a motion here. Just first to the petitioners, I appreciate you guys engaging in the process and reaching a reasonable settlement. There's give and take in that, and really appreciate that you guys did so in good faith.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it'd be my privilege to make a motion that we accept the stipulation brought forward by the county and the petitioners.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further comment from the board? Seeing as none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful day.
You too. Bye. Oh my gosh. Right as I
Jeff.
Only in Lincoln County.
It's like kids. The second I get on the phone, that's right.
A struggle we all understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to the end of the cases that we had scheduled on this agenda, and I am available for any comments to and from the board.
Great. Well, first, do we want to review and approve the minutes from our prior hearing? So let's do that. Board, have you guys reviewed the minutes from March 22nd, 2021? And if so, would you like to make a motion to approve them?
I move that we approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Is there a second?
I'd second it.
Any further comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Next is State Board of Equalization comments. Any comments from the board members?
Well, not all the assessors are available to hear this. I want to thank everybody involved in this year's assessment. I understand and I clearly acknowledge that this was an extraordinarily challenging year. And the fact that we've got so few appeals that are appearing before us is just a testament to how hard you guys worked to make this a palatable transaction or year for everybody. And I just want to applaud you all, Clark County, all of the other counties that we've heard from, and those particularly that we didn't, because this pandemic has really had such a broad impact on people, and to be able to sit here and see really the results of your hard work in terms of so few appeals, I just really appreciate the hard work.
Yeah, I would like to echo my colleagues' comments. And, Ben Franklin said, nothing is certain in this world except for death and taxes, right? And taxes is the cost that we all pay for living in a well-ordered society. And the ability to make sure that equity and that we do so in a way that is fair and reasonable is important. Nevada has a very unique tax structure, and it's one that I think that we've had comments and conversations around for a number of years about how we go forward within our state, making sure that we're able to fund the services that are needed by us as residents. And it's important that we have those conversations. But as it operates within this board and as it operates within the counties and the assessors, I believe that we have qualified professionals who come to work every day wanting to carry out the intent of the statutes and the regulations. And I applaud all of you for that. And being able to apply equity where it matters in order to make sure that fairness is achieved. And so, in my comments, I just want to make sure that we continue to work together as both residents, government, and as a board in general to make sure that we carry forth the intent of our laws, which are to make sure that we have properly funded services that then also allows for our residents to continue to thrive and live in a place where they can rely on those services. So again, I would like to thank all the assessors, all the staff of this committee, and also my fellow board members for carrying me as dead weight. So thank you.
We decided we're going to keep you. That anything from your end, Glenn?
Now, speaking of dead weight, I thought I'd comment. If anybody comes up with any new acronyms they can throw into this process, I'd appreciate it. So,
and
at any rate, I would like to comment that not only is the county assessors doing a good job and the people helping us with this at the state level figure this out, next year it's going to be even more complicated probably because everybody's going to be talking about their loss of income. And so just be aware that hopefully this is a short-term situation we're in currently, but that next year it's going to correct itself and it's going to create lots of interesting discussions that are going to affect the appraisers.
And I agree with my colleagues. My one comment will be, Marianne, I really appreciate what we're hearing from all the taxpayers when they're before us, a majority of them that are recognizing the professionalism of your office, your willingness to work with them and engage with them. And I very much appreciate that. And secondly, very much appreciate how well everyone was prepared. I know you must have worked incredibly hard to prepare for these hearings, prepare your staff, and that was clear to me throughout this hearing, the effort that went in and the fairness that resulted from that. So thank you, and thank you to your staff. With that, any other comments from staff to the board? Anything we need to discuss, Jeff, Michelle? With that, let's close with public comment. So anyone here that wants to step forward with public comment, please do so. Please open up with raised hands online. Should I wait for any amount of time, or there's 0 people on Zoom, so am I good, Michelle, to close that off? Well, with that being said, we are going to adjourn.